Hey, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Budget Committee meeting for the 27th of April. Now call the meeting open at 1 p.m. And as I said, welcome you all here today, councillors and staff. And of course, this is the first of our new Budget Committee meetings that will continue over the coming weeks until such time as the budget is resolved, all going well, by the 30th of June. I don't believe we have any requests for a leave of absence or any apologies, so we'll move through to recognition of the traditional owners. Thank you, Councillor Duff.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to acknowledge country and the land where we meet this morning, Waka Waka land, and acknowledge the elders, both past, present and emerging. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Duff. Thank you, Mr CEO, also, and your staff for putting together today's agenda for the order of business. That's much appreciated. That'll give us some structure with which we can operate the committee meetings. So on the agenda then is item 4, declaration of interest. Does any councillor have concerns about any item on the agenda which they feel may give rise to a conflict of interest? Mr CEO, anything to add?
Mr Mayor, I'll jump in. The bunyias will come up this afternoon in discussion, and given that we've had that, but it's a setting of a rate, and so the setting of a rate is not a conflict because it's one of the exemptions. So when we get to that, so it's not a surprise because we'll be dealing with the waste. So under the Act and Regs, it's the setting of the rates is otherwise we wouldn't have any of us in the room. So basically, I'll preempt that one before, no, not before the question comes, but yeah, I don't know of any others for the committee meeting.
Thanks, Mr CEO. So no conflict of interest from the setting of rates. Clarified that. Thank you very much. Okay, on to the business then at hand. First item 5.1 is a discount on rates for 21-22 year at page 5. And I might just hand over to you, Mr CEO, just to give us an intro on that one. Thanks.
Yep, Mr Mayor, if I may, just as far as, do you mind if I just take 2 minutes and talk about structure of these going forward? So councillors would be aware we had the, or would be aware you voted for it, to form these. So we put the report up to the General there the other month, and given a fair degree of thought about how to make these work so that they're not so formal that they stifle debate, but also formal enough so that we have a direction that comes out of them. So the committee type structure, whilst they're not effectively they run on the same basis as the standing committee. So if you want to have the discussion before you move the resolution, and I only had a chance to speak to the Mayor this morning since we put this one together on Friday, is what we're looking at doing is we'll rejig the diary appointments a little bit and change some of the, we're a little bit behind where I'd hoped we'd be with some of the topics. So what we're going to do, or what we're going to do, says here Rashleigh, look at the policies and the procedures around the budget resolutions at the first part of the meeting. So that we got the rating ones, some of the rating ones today. The committee will recommend back to council. So whether they go to a general, they'll end up as part of the budget meeting. So we're looking for a clear direction from council. Now there's a mountain of information that has been provided. So what you'll start to get is be it competition policy, be it hardship policy, they'll feed back through this process and then they can be forwarded on as part of the budget policies. And to preempt and give Councillor Duff a wonderful bit of news, the procedure for the expenses reimbursement policy is complete and it's just sitting waiting. So we should be doing the expenses reimbursement policy as a matter of course annually. So it will now get folded into, since from this beginning of this term, get folded into the budget policies. So it'll come back through. And I've held the procedure back. I've had it finished for a little while. I've held the procedure back. We're just tidying up some of the grammar and language in it. So it'll go out to you all very shortly with the policy. So the two of them actually go together. So you're not looking at half without the other half. So you've got all the information there. So once we go through the policy bits at the front end of this, we won't have one of these tomorrow because with the general, it's a pretty heavy agenda. And we've got a little bit of a workshop discussion in any which case after the general. We will run the next one of these Wednesday week, and that'll pick up water and sewage. And so we'll reissue all these calendar appointments and start to rejig. But we should be able to box off a section every week, so the council can make or the committee can make a recommendation back to council about what needs to be. So if it's the consultation finishes on the 30th of April, or the first round on the second pedestal charge, so we can bring that back next week with the water and sewage and deal with all that in one hit next week. And then if there's other directions to come from that, or a direction to the ladies can go off and model. The other good thing about getting waste and wastewater done in these first 2 weeks, the loans, which are often talked about, and there's a fair degree of explanation in the loans, because some of the information that's kicking around out in the cloud isn't quite right. The loan policy needs to be done, so we can bring the loan policy back, but it's dependent on what we do with water and waste and sewage. Now, it really is a good news story, because council continues to draw down its debt and has for the last 3 years. But so we're looking at structuring these, so you'll have a formal report with the policy type rating resolutions at the front end, and then there'll be just a topic for discussion that we're having on the day, and today's waste, for example. So this one's a little bit of a trial, probably these first couple, a little bit of a trial, so we can settle into a pattern that actually works. Really, really would appreciate feedback as to what works for you and what doesn't work, because as the Mayor said, this is the very first time we've ever done this. And in my history of local government, this is the very first time we've ever live streamed a budget discussion. So it is a little bit of a learning as we go, and looking for ways to improve it. So if you come up with anything, only too pleased for the feedback. And with these specific policies, I'll hand over to the General Manager, that Mr. Mayor, because it's all her and her team's work.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. The first order of business today, you'll see, is the discounts on the rates there, with the 30-day discount to be allowed for full payment of all rates, including overdue rates, charges, interest, fees and levies appearing on the rate notice, must be received by council or approved agency by the close of business on or before the due date. So the recommendation here, the officer's recommendation, is down within, pursuant to section 130 of the Local Government Regs of 2012, the differential rates, wastewater utility charges, water access charges, refuse collection charges made and levied shall be subject to a discount of 10% if paid within the discount period of 30 days of the date of issue of the rate notice, provided that 1. All of the aforementioned rates and charges are paid within 30 days of the date of issue of the rate notice. 2. All other rates and charges appearing on the rate notice that are not subject to discount are paid within 30 days of the date of issue of the rate notice. And 3. All other overdue rates and charges relating to the rateable assessment are paid within 30 days of the date of issue of the rate notice. Now, this is standard procedure, and I'd just like for council's information to clarify this, that the 30-day discount period that we afford to our ratepayers impacts on our revenue by about 2.06 million per year. That's what we actually lose. That's that 10% discount within the 30 days. Normally, traditionally, there's about 85% of our ratepayers take up that discount there. 85, yeah, traditionally. And yeah, so I just thought I'd sort of just put a little bit of context around that for you, that and it also assists council with our cash flow, that when we do our forecasts and that, we do rely on that revenue twice yearly to come in, that we know that we are pretty well guaranteed that 85% of revenue coming into our accounts. So if there's any operational questions in that, we have our senior rates officer here that can answer any other questions if you deem necessary. Thank you.
Yeah,
Councillor Jones.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. Just, this is currently the, what we operate under now. There's been no changes to the last year, so this is exactly the same as, yeah, thank you.
And General Manager, is this in keeping with what most regional councils do, the 30 days and the 10%? Pretty well standard across local government, to your knowledge?
No, it's not, through you, Mr. Mayor, it's not standardised. Every council, our local government has a different discount period and also different discounts. Some councils do have, it may be 10%, for example, a council I know has 10% for the first 30 days and then 5% for the 30 days after that. Another council on a similar size and revenue sources we have, they have a 5% discount for 30 days only. And several other councillors don't have a discount period. So it's up to the individual council.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I know when Southern Downs, they reduced it from 10% back to 5%. It caused a lot of angst in the community. They just saw it as a way for the council to get more money because obviously they didn't offer the discount. So it wasn't very palatable when they brought it back from 10 to 5. But my question is just how are we tracking as far as overdue rates and look our percentage? I think we were trying to get under 10. Is that happening, or are we above the 10%?
Our target is 7%, councillor, and at the moment I think we're tracking at 11%. However, this will go tomorrow to tomorrow's council meeting, and Daryl may correct me on this, but this is the lowest our outstanding rates have ever been in 6 years, and with the lowest amount of properties as well outstanding. So that's a great compliment to our rates team, and they've been doing a lot of follow-ups, and I think it's a credit to them at the moment.
Susan, just to clarify that's the lowest after a rates issue, or the yeah, it's after the rates have been issued and that period directly after, isn't it? Yeah, not. I think we've been lower because we'll drop down under 10% with the work you guys are doing. Correct? Yeah.
That's correct, Mr. CEO. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I'd just like to chime in and say congratulations to Revenue Manager Daryl, Susan, and everyone involved in your finance team. So we're in the best position we've been in terms of rates debtors for 6 years. So thanks on behalf of the community for that great work, keeping that cash flow coming through. No doubt there's more work to be done, but that's a good start. Thank you. That's great. Yeah.
So, through Mr. Mayor, so the people who are on plans, obviously they don't get the discount. That would be correct. And I'm just wondering roughly how many ratepayers we have on the plans.
Sorry, Daryl has just said it's about 1,500, but I can take that on. I can clarify that. I think it's in our council report for tomorrow, councillor. But it's around 1,500 there, and that as well. Part of the report was that those hardship applications or people's on those plans have increased as well, so they are taking the advantage of that hardship policy, and the interest stops as soon as they sign up for the hardship policy as well.
Susan and Daryl, could you maybe just tell us a little bit about that hardship policy for the benefit of the committee and also if anyone in the community that's watching? A bit of an overview as to what we offer under that hardship policy for ratepayers who are struggling to pay their rates. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll give you an overview and then I can get Daryl to give you more detail. But the hardship policy was adopted by council, I'm thinking maybe 2 years ago, to recognise that people do suffer financial hardship, and council is very, I think, compassionate in understanding these hardships. So the hardship policy, people and organisations make application to council, and that application is supported by their finances there, so we can go through them. And Darryl and his team sit down and work out some payment schedule within the first 2 years that the whole of the outstanding debt is to be paid back, and how they work out a schedule that won't increase their level of debt and the angst of people who are struggling to make those payments. So that's all done very compassionately. We bring it to council, council approve it, adopt it, and we go from there. And it's very, very rare that the people do, that they don't honour these payments. But there is, Darryl and his team do keep a close eye on them and make sure they continually engage with the people to make sure that they're still handling that level of payment. Several times people, when they fall on sometimes better times, that they do pay early as well, which is pleasing for them. But I'll just bring Darryl over to see if I've missed anything, and he can probably fill in the blanks for me.
Thank you, councillors. Just a couple of things to add. Normally we work on a 2-year maximum time frame for people to pay off their rates. Under the hardship policy, we have extended that to 3 years, but that includes, that payment reschedule includes all future rates going forward. So they're not just clearing their outstanding rates, it includes their rates for the next 3 years, so that the whole scheme of things is to get the rates cleared in total so that they have a zero balance within 3 years. Can I just say that the last couple of months, the couple of applications that council has approved, the ratepayers have expressed sincere thanks. They are genuinely knocked off their socks by council's generosity. And as the GM has stated, the one particular person I was speaking to, by giving him 6 months breathing space, it's just taken such a load off his shoulders, and his circumstances have changed, and I'm pretty confident that he will have his rates paid much sooner than what we have given him the freedom to do. I just wanted to pass on to council that the ratepayers who are receiving the benefit of these hardship approvals are sincerely and genuinely thankful for council's generosity and compassion.
And just to you, Mr Mayor, may I just add as well, with Darryl and the team, we are governed obviously by the Local Government Act, but we're very, very reluctant to bring any reports to council where we do have to sell up people's homes or properties. We're all ratepayers ourselves, and we understand, and it is the last course of action that we bring to council there to sell those up. No one likes to see that.
Thank you. Through you, Mr Mayor. I've read the report carefully, and based on the feedback given, I'm supportive of maintaining the 10% discount in the 30 days. I think it's clear from the numbers that you've given there. 80%, 85% of people take that up, and I think for the people that I certainly know in our region, they really do. Everybody does watch that discount day quickly and reminds each other of that. So watches it quite carefully. So I'm supportive of maintaining that at this point in time. That's my view anyway, Mr Mayor.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Schumacher. Any other councillors want questions for Susan?
Yeah, through you, Mr Mayor, not so much questions. I just want to support Councillor Schumacher there. I think that the system that we currently have, and listening to the General Manager's comments at other councils around the area that neighbour us and whatnot, and other areas across, similar councils to us across Queensland are only offering 5%, so I think a 10% discount. And to hear the news that it's the lowest situation we've been in arrears of rates and all that sort of stuff certainly endorses what the system's meant to do. So congratulations again to all you people in the finance sector. You do have a tough job sometimes dealing with some customers and all that sort of stuff for obvious reasons, but yeah, I'm happy to support as well, to leave it as it is. Yeah.
Other councillors want to comment before we put the motion forward? No? Okay, so happy with that? Well, we've got the committee, we've got the motion there as presented there. It's a 10% 30-day period and the rest of the details there. Do we have a mover for that? Thanks, Councillor Shoemaker. A seconder. Thanks, Councillor Froloff. Anyone want to speak for or against? If not, we'll go straight to the vote. Those in favour? Okay, carried unanimously. That'll be now recommended to Council to come forward. Okay, we'll now go on to 5.2, which is in relation to setting the level of concession on rates and charges for approved pensioners for the financial period ending 30 June 2022. And Susan, you happy to talk us through this one as well? Thanks.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just in summary, Council is committed to assisting ratepayers who receive a pension. As a result, Council has agreed to provide assistance by way of a concession on rates to pensioners who meet the administrative guidelines of the Queensland Government Pensioner Rate Subsidy Scheme. I will read the officer's recommendation shortly, but again, just to put a little bit of context here, is that the pensioners it's not an over 50s card. We don't recognise that sort of pension or a funded retiree pension. It's the Queensland Government pensioner. They have to be a fully fledged pensioner to receive this discount. Again, through this discount, it equates to just over 400 qualified pensioners we have within our region. And the revenue, that reduction in council revenue equates to $805,000 per year that we give back, well, that we don't take from our pensioners, in recognition, obviously, of their contribution over the years, paying taxes and contributing to our region and our community as well. So hence the 20% discount. So the officer's recommendation is that Council recommends to, the committee recommends to Council that pursuant to sections 120, 121 and 122 of the Local Government Regulation 2012, a rebate of rates be granted to all ratepayers who are pensioners and who are eligible for the Queensland Government Pensioner Remission. The rebate will be set at 20% of the differential general rate, sewage utility charges, water utility charges and waste refuse utility charges, and 2, the maximum concession granted per property shall be capped at $200 per annum. And my apologies, I should have drawn your attention that it is capped at $200 per annum there. So thank you.
Thanks, Susan. And that's in compliance with, there's some regulations around this, legislation that's fully compliant and consistent with what we've done previously.
Yes, Mr Mayor, there's
Okay.
no changes there to
Thanks,
that.
Shep. Has anyone got any questions or comments on that? Thanks, Rosie.
Through you, Mr Mayor. GM Jarvis said, I've, sorry, going to choke. I've had a few people come up to me, or we have spoken to it before, that they can't get the pension, as you said, the seniors card and that, whether South Bennett Regional Council will one day look into doing something, because they, as you know, a lot of farmers, some aren't eligible for the pension. They're asset rich but money poor. If there's any chance that South Bennett Regional Council can look at the seniors card, like giving them a little bit of a discount or something. Do you see that ever happening for us, or?
Thanks, Councillor. Through you, Mr Mayor. Councillor, that would obviously be a decision that Council would have to make, and I'm more than happy to. My staff did a little bit of a statistical look around to see if we could see how many how many people, just preempting your question there, because that has been thrown around in a lot of other communities as well. And I recognise that, having family in a similar position. And so we found it very hard to get the statistical data there to do any firm figures on how that would affect us financially or affect the council financially. But I'm more than happy to look into that you know, on behalf of council and form some sort of report to bring that back maybe in the next financial year, so we could consider that as part of our next budget for council to consider. But like I said, it is very, very hard to get that firm because you can't get anything from the federal government or state government supporting those figures to see what we're actually looking at.
Thank you. Through you, Mr Mayor, to you, GM Jarvis. With regards to this pensioner subsidy, we haven't actually specified that it's aged pension.
Yes, that is the Queensland, that's the government. Well, just
So,
hang on a minute because, sorry.
Yeah.
No, sorry, it could be disability, but I'll just I'll just qualify that there with Darryl.
As long as they have a pensioner concession card, there is no restriction from the Queensland government as to what type of pension it is. So it could be disability,
Could be sole parent even?
could be
or-
sole parent.
Okay.
Yep. As long
Rightio.
as they have a pensioner concession card.
Okay, thank you.
Well, if there's no more questions, we've got, anything else there, Mark? With that, we've got the recommendation. The committee recommends to council as read by Susan. It's the 20% course with $200, capped at $200. So does we have a mover for that? Yep, thanks Councillor Duff, and a seconder. Thanks Councillor Jones. No one wants to speak for or against? If not, those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thanks everybody. So that'll go through to council. Okay, 5.3, exemptions and concessions on various special, separate and utility charges, 21-22 at page 9. Susan and Darryl, did you want to lead us through this as well? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This is possibly one of my favourites in our rates reduction. So the summary is council recognises that various groups or organisations provide a public service or community benefit throughout the region. In order to assist these groups or organisations, council has determined to provide concessions on various rates and charges. So this is council recognising so many of our volunteer groups, our community-run groups, and that the way they give back to our community, council's giving back to them by way of this rates concession. So there's a list here of the concession categories, who it is, what the concessions are. Some are 100% on general rates, some are 100% there on separate rates, 75% water concession. They're all different categories which will be listed in our revenue statement for all ratepayers to see, or all categories to see. Sewage access, waste bins, all of that is taken into consideration. So there's varying percentages of discounts per category for each organisation. There, you'll see that listed there in front of you. The contribution back to the community through these concessions here, the revenue that council's actually giving back into the community, there is $255,000 to our community groups by not rating them the full categories available for council to rate.
So Susan, I just see there with all those categories listed, it's 100% on differential general rates and 100% on separate rates. So everyone seems to be getting that on all these community groups. But then water, sewerage and waste bin changes. Are we able to just work through each line and just sort of just give us some detail on that for the benefit of council, for committee and the community? Thanks.
I'll just give that to Darryl. Darryl's been here for years and years, and he's our guru here of rates. He knows all of the background information. So I'll hand it over to Darryl.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. About 2018 there was a thorough review done of all of the community groups and organisations who were receiving a reduction in rates from council. The categories and their respective percentages were all based on a number of things, I guess. I guess the number of volunteers, the size of the group. You know, there are a variety of groups and sporting clubs who struggle, and it was an extremely difficult task trying to decide what group or what category should receive what percentage of assistance. And once that change was adopted, the reductions, or there was a phasing in of a reduction to what the current remissions are being provided. So without spending a lot of detail and going back through the history of those reports, Mr. Mayor, I would just leave it to say that there was a lot of discussion between the sitting councillors who were here when that was decided. There was a lot of time and effort put into debating the percentages and where they should finally end up. And once again, of course, this is our recommendation to you as the councillors to consider. If at some stage down the track we need to revisit this, and councillors think that a particular category needs to be amended, well then we can certainly put some time into reconsidering that again.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I actually remember sitting down and working through this, and this was actually quite a heated topic of discussion at the time, wasn't it, Councillor Duff?
Yes, actually, absolutely.
But the one thing I do want to make note here is that we gave the Guides and Scout group 100% on everything because we believe the children are our future, and we want them to have nothing to hold them back from kids to join those particular clubs, because we feel that they're an important part of the future moving forward.
Thank you, Councillor. We'll just get, as the Mayor's request, I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, we'll just get Darryl to go down the lists for everyone and open it up to the floor then.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So just working our way down through the list, your Queensland Country Women's Association, they receive 100% concession off their general rates and their separate rates, and then a 75% concession on their utility charges. Youth accommodation, so these are hostels. Again, most, as the Mayor's alluded to, the general rates and the separate rates are all 100% for all organisations. It's just the utility charges. So for those youth accommodation facilities, Council decided not to provide any reduction in utility charges. The Scouts and Guides we've just spoken about. Seniors and welfare groups, once again, their utility charges have been set to 50%. Next one down is kindergartens. Council's decided not to provide any relief for their utility charges. Service and other clubs, so this is Lions and the like. They receive a 75% concession on their utility charges. Showgrounds. Showgrounds are a unique setup. A lot of the showgrounds in the South Burnett have caravan parks attached to them. There are a couple that have caravan parks, so that the caravan park component is treated separately to the showground because the caravan park is an income stream for them. It's not included in this concession area, but the showgrounds themselves, they receive a 50% concession on their utility charges. Race grounds, there's a couple of those. Again, because it's a commercial enterprise, so to speak, there's no concession on the utility charges, just the 100% on their general rates and separate charges. For museums and the theatres and heritage buildings, 100% concession, including the utility charges, except for their waste services. All the sporting groups, 75% concession on their utility charges. For charitable organisations and for community-owned halls, once again, there's no concession for their utility charges, just their 100% concession on general and their separate rates.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Certainly, I think it's great that council offer these concessions so that these activities can continue in our community. Just following on from Councillor Potter's comments about the youth groups. I do agree. However, I just wondered what was the rationale around not giving the kindergartens any relief on their utility charges? Because certainly I know kindergartens these days are competing with commercial daycare centres and certainly do struggle to raise funds already to employ their teachers and these sorts of things. So I just wondered if there was any rationale around the kindergartens, why they weren't included with youth, because certainly I agree with Councillor Potter, young people are our future.
The kindergartens, councillor, were grouped together with the childcare centres, and a lot of the childcare centres are privately owned rather than just the kindies. And having said that, a lot of the kindies, to my knowledge, that I've been dealing with the last couple of years, have mentorship or support from larger organisations. I'm thinking of the playgroups and things out in some of the rural areas. While they don't receive a lot of financial support, I believe they do get management assistance and that sort of thing. But certainly, yeah, the decision at the time was that the kindergartens were treated very similar to the childcare centres in that respect.
So just to confirm, we're not offering commercial childcare centres a discount, so these are not-for-profit community-owned kindergartens, and we're comparing them to commercial operators who offer the same service. Yeah, I probably struggle with that, I'm sorry. For me, I think the kindergartens are already struggling because of the commercial operators and because plenty of people like myself have relied on, unfortunately, had to rely on. I was in a position where I had to take my children out of kindergarten because I couldn't work full time and have them there. So they're already struggling to get the numbers of kids to actually make them sustainable. So I would probably rather see kindergartens get the same sort of support and treatment as our youth groups, or something there for their utility charges, because I do think they are definitely struggling across the region, and mums and dads are having to do significant fundraising to actually meet that gap. So I guess at least propose, I understand, this is tough because our budget is so tight, but some discount for those kindergartens on their utility charges, I think, would be my recommendation. Anyway, what I would like to see. Can some information be provided around how many kindergartens we have and what that might look like for council, so we could consider that going forward?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Darryl, you just mentioned before with regards to the daycare centres and the kindies, but the daycare centres, they all pay full rates, don't they? Yep, they all full commercial rates on everything.
Absolutely.
It's only the kindies that don't pay the rates. Okay. Yeah.
I missed, yeah, so that they get a concession there, absolutely, but probably just feeling a little bit like Councillor Shoemaker that whether we should try and line kindies up as a child welfare organisation that provides support for young children, parents, along with the seniors and other welfare groups at 50-50. I don't know, just thinking whether there's a little bit of a commonality there, Darryl, in terms of providing support services for children, similar to what's provided for seniors and welfare groups. They're not such the high-intensity educational institutions that childcare centres are now around the fee structure. So I just wonder whether we could perhaps, if committee had some thoughts on that, something to consider. Yeah.
Well, through you,
Danita,
Mr. Mayor, I think if we're going to do that, then we've actually got to look at youth accommodation because that's all owned by CTC as well. And I think then, so maybe this needs a bigger workshop in itself after we've finalise the budget, unless we're going to do this now. But I do believe that if we're going to do kindies, we need to actually look at the youth accommodation as well.
Yeah, look, and just to throw one out there through you, Mr. Mayor, would it be reasonable to assume that the charitable organisations, the community-owned halls, like, probably take them out with the 0%, but the kindergartens compared to seniors and the youth accommodations, would they, certainly the kindergartens, would they have a fairly large impact on water access and sewage and waste bin collections more so than the seniors, or is that where that was derived from to be a 0%?
I don't think so. And to be perfectly honest, I don't think there are a huge number of kindergartens in our South Burnett area, particularly that would have water and sewage. There's probably 2 that I can think of off the top of my head, and I haven't got numbers with me. That's just a guesstimate. But I think you would find there would only be 2, maybe 3. So we're not talking tens of thousands of dollars. You're probably talking about, if you provided a 50% concession, you're only talking perhaps, a couple of $1,000. But I'd have to do the research. I haven't got those numbers with me, I'm afraid.
That was going to allude to my next question as to what are the numbers there, but if that being the case, I certainly don't have a problem with Councillor Shoemaker's suggestion that we perhaps look at or contemplate that 0% on those water access and sewage access, perhaps.
I'm happy with that too, but I pushed back on a lot of these where we were taking away the discounts, because I think that this groups, sporting clubs, and the different groups, half the time they're looking after our facilities, and I didn't want to make it tougher than we were already doing with them. So, but even the race grounds are different to the showgrounds, and yet Wando's got a showgrounds and a race club. So I think I agree with Councillor Potter, I think it needs to be looked at a bit more closely, because there's no consistency in this. And I never supported any of this. I voted against it all because I just thought there's not a proper methodology behind it.
Yeah, I probably agree with Councillor Duff. I'd really love to look into this a little bit more deeply. But for the time being, for this budget, do we need to make a decision today, do we, Mr Mayor?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, thank you. I was button deficient. And it's put up as a recommendation. We need to start getting some sort of direction as where we're going. So listening to the discussion, one of the things that, if I could be, and I'll put my mechanical hat on, is if I can say anywhere where we give even a couple of $1,000 if council wants, keep in please in consideration that there would need to be an equal and opposite reset somewhere else within the budget. So as you're going forward, Daryl's is exactly right. This is small beer. So as far as if we did the kindergartens and you say put them at 25 or 50% this year as a statement of intent, and then looking forward to go there, we can leave this one till next week and bring back a little bit more information. That's not a big deal, but this is a really good example of, if we're going to give something on one hand, and it's just purely not saying yes, no to the specific, but if we're giving something on one hand, it's like the law of physics, there will be an equal and opposite reaction on the other hand. Otherwise, the budget will start to creep out. So in council's hands is what we can drop 50 in there today, or we can bring it back next week and add it to the front end of next week's agenda. That's the purpose of any of these workshops / committee meetings, is to get a discussion, get a direction, and then so we can put this thing together.
Well, through you, Mr Mayor, I'm quite happy, like the others, to go for the kindies with 50. But as I said, I still think that if we're going to do kindies and the youth groups at, the kindies at 50%, then we need to do the youth accommodation at 50%.
Through you, Mr Mayor, can I please ask the finance team, and that these groups that we've got in front of us, the pedestal charges that council's looking at in putting in, which one of these will these be affected? Can you please tell me that?
Any of these community groups that does have toilets, obviously, will be affected by this charge. But if the charge increases by, let's say, for example, 30%, then their concession will also increase by whatever that percentage is. So effectively, the full charge won't be getting passed on by council. Council will be passing on an equal amount of remission as well, but the net amount that community organisation will pay will increase, just not to the same degree as everybody else.
I might just clarify there. I think, Ros, it's a really good question about the letters we sent out about the rise of the second pedestal charge, potentially going up to a higher level. My understanding was what the intention of that workshop was not to apply it to any of these groups on here, perhaps only kindergartens. I wasn't sure, but I think all the others were out. It was really just on those state government and commercial operators. And I, for one, probably wouldn't be keen to see that apply to kindies, to be honest. And I think we'd have to give serious thought as to whether we applied it to aged care as well, those human social services organisations. But that's a discussion to have. But I'm probably hearing what you're saying there, Councillor Fryloff, that if we are going to increase the second pedestal, I personally would like to see that we probably leave the kindies alone and leave all these groups alone and not touch them. But, you know, open to what other councillors think. Yeah.
Yes, I tend to agree with what you're saying, certainly, Mr. Mayor and Councillor Fryloff. I do think kindergartens do need to be given a remission. I'm hearing what's said, and I do understand the delicate balance, but I do understand their challenges in terms of being sustainable into the future and when they're competing with these large commercial-owned daycare centres who, are receiving larger uptakes in numbers. I do think it is something, those kindergartens are an important part of our social fabric, and certainly in my experience are an important part of our community and our region, and they work hard to fundraise. And I'm not saying that any other group here doesn't. The thing probably just in regards to the youth accommodation, I understand, CTC is a not-for-profit organisation and they own our youth hostel. And I do understand they had some funding challenges this year, but they do receive some government funding where our kindergartens, maybe I would like to know more about that, but I don't think they do, not to that extent. So I think a report from the conversations that's been had, some more, I'd certainly welcome some more information before I make a decision on this one.
So, Mr. Say, if we want to leave this till next week, could we delay this on the table or to the next meeting?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll bring this one back next week, and we'll get some of those costs and numbers in there, and then you guys can have a play with the percentages. Daryl, I'm not sure, it was done just before I got here, how hard it would be to find up that original, if there were the original report. I'm not sure what format it was in.
The former CEO conducted that review and that was all his baby, but I think I still have a copy, so it should be available.
Yeah, we'll just have a bit of a dig and see what we can find and that's on file. Yep. Okay.
So as it's on the agenda, do we need to procedurally we lay this on the table, or can we just... Well, is council thinking that way? We move to leave this lay on the table till next week? Yeah, someone happy to move that? Yep, thanks Councillor Henson, a seconder. Thanks Councillor Potter. Everyone in favour? Okay, carried unanimously. Linnell, we'll bring it forward next week. Yep. Thanks, committee. Okay, next one now is the 5.4, waiving the minimum general rates, 21, 22, 11. Susan, Darryl, did you want to take it away? Thanks.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. This waiving of minimum general rates here, it's the council has determined that some classes of property shall be exempt from the minimum general rate. Generally, these properties are small parcels of land used for a pump site or small parcels of land worked in conjunction with other properties held in the same ownership. So what they're saying is those little tiny parcels, they're exempt. So I will just give Darryl hand over to Darryl for more detail there. Oh, sorry, and just one thing. The waiving of these reduces council's revenue by an extra $2,000.
Yeah, Council, it seems a little odd, but the Department of Natural Resources will value these 20 square metre allotments separately from other land parcels. And at times it's only because the applicant is in a different name to the other land parcel. We did have half a dozen or so of these properties a few years back, but they've been whittled away due to sales and things. And one of the current properties, I'm fairly certain, is just inside our boundary, with the majority of the land holding in the Gympie Regional Council area. So I'm not sure how that farm got split up, but yeah, there's a small acre or so that's in our council area, and the rest of it's in Gympie. So they are quite interesting parcels of land. But to be fair, I guess when that particular one is not really accessing council's facilities or road network, it's all coming from another council area. It's probably fair and reasonable to waive the minimum general rate. And certainly for the small pump sites where it's only a very, very small parcel of land, once again, it's probably fair and reasonable to waive the minimum charge.
Has anyone got any comments, thoughts on that? Same business as
No.
usual, do you think? Or,
Yeah.
Councillor Jones?
It's through you, Mr Mayor, just pretty much going on the information that was just received. I think it's just a straightforward matter that I'm supportive of this. It doesn't put any pressure on us, and it makes sense. It's there was an issue up at Yarraman too on Hobdell Road or something. Remember there was a piece of land in Yarraman or Toowoomba Shire, and the landowner, I think we'd work with them to let them move the other piece of land from the South Burnett over into the Toowoomba Shire. So that's options for these guys too if they're that close to the boundary. So they're happy to support this.
Yeah, I tend to agree with Councillor Jones. They're only these little 20 square metre parcels. Are they big enough to hold a bore or something? And it's cost council $2,000 in total per annum. It seems unjust to be asking people to pay rates for a piece of land that's no bigger than a common bedroom. So yeah, what do other councillors think?
Yeah, I'm supportive of this, and it is, and as it describes there, small parcels of land for be it a bore or something that's in conjunction with a property held there for the purpose of that property being able to still maintain operation, be it a bore or something. But yeah, these are probably not even areas that big, 20 metres square. Like, happy to support it.
Through you, Mr Mayor, with regards to that one property you said that bounded onto Gympie, you said that was about an acre of land?
Yeah, that's correct. I believe so. I can't tell you off the top of my head, or was it in this report? No. There are very small parcels of land.
Yep, so, I mean, I actually agree with Councillor Jones. A couple of years ago, we gave a piece of land back to Toowoomba Regional Council because it was right on the border, and maybe this is something we should be looking at for this particular block of land. Obviously not Tablelands one, but the Warroondin one maybe should be one that we look at that for. But yes, I'm agreeing to this.
Councillor, without being flippant, maybe we could take the farm into our boundary.
Fully support.
Councillor Shoemaker, did you still have a question or you want to add to that before we consider it? Thanks.
No, I'm happy with the information provided, and I agree. I think maybe if this is something that, has been sort of sitting here, something that council's been doing for some time, I think it might be worthwhile investigating what that next option is. Definitely.
Yeah, if committee's happy with that, we can put that up and recommend that, and maybe Darryl and Susan, you can put some work into that over the next 12 months so that this time next year we might be able to have a recommendation come back, or even earlier, where there are blocks of land right on the boundary, as Councillor Jones say, that we might be able to move one way or the other, perhaps. Maybe CEO Mark's got a good idea to bring them across our way.
The as simple as it is, it's actually a boundary realignment, and I remember the council went through it. This council went through it for those Yarram and Toowoomba Shire blocks, Toowoomba City Council blocks, regional council blocks. So you actually have to make it. It's a fairly straightforward process, but it takes a while. So if you wanted it in place for next year, you would probably start. We would need to consult with the landowners, and then it goes to the Boundary Realignment Commission, and it goes through the full process, or not the full process, but the process of the Boundary Commission, and then they'll make an adjudication and amend the maps and go from there. So it sits outside the budget process, but it's something first port of call would be, as always, would be to talk to the landholder and see what they want to do.
And Mr. CEO, that being the case, it's outside the budget process. Is that something we could add to our op plan and do it as part of the operational plan, one of our projects, to work on that over the next 12 months?
I think actually that would be probably just its own report, because it'd need a resolution to go to the Boundary Commission. So if that's all right, we can bring back a report, do a bit of legwork. Definitely, again, I reiterate, and I'm probably just repeating myself for my own benefit, but we would need to talk to the landowner in the first instance and see what they want to do.
Just leave that with the officers to bring back a report when time allows, if we're happy with that, everybody. Yeah. Okay, so we've got the recommendation there that as presented, continue as we've done previously to provide a rebate equal to the full value of those separate and differential charges up to the differences stated there on those particular properties. So do we have a mover for that? Thanks, Councillor Duff, and a second. Thanks, Councillor Froeloff. And everyone in favour? Okay, so we'll pass that through unanimously, and that'll get recommendation. Will now go up to council. Thank you. Okay, now the last item on the agenda, which of course is the bigger one, is 5.5, and that's the Waste Services Operational Budget for next financial year, 21-22. We've got the report there on item 13. So, GM, are you going to lead us on this one as well, or Peter? Peter, this is your portfolio. This is your area of responsibility. We'll take it away. Thanks, Peter.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'll take this one and first off offer an apology for the manager of Waste who can't be with us today, but certainly acknowledge the work that he has done with the finance team in putting modelling together, and I know the couple of workshops he's held with council on the waste assets and the services provided. So just acknowledge Craig's efforts there. So today just wanted to review and probably get some direction on where we are going with the waste business unit. So today we're looking at waste services only, and as you're aware, we operate the waste business unit as a separate business unit to the rest of the general operations of council. So in saying that, so we try basically fund the services that we're providing in waste services from the separate waste areas. So services we provide, the collection services, everyone's aware of with the wheelie bins, both domestic and commercial. We do the street park bins, and then so collection is one half of the service, and the disposal is the other side. So we've got all the landfill, the transfer station sites operate 17 different facilities across the region, and the other part of waste services is looking after all of the legacy landfills that we have out there. So obviously, once we close a facility, we can't just walk away from it. So they're the basic services we provide. Our revenue sources offsetting that. So we have three major revenue sources: the fees and charges that are collected, say particularly for commercial waste disposal, things like asbestos disposal, construction demolition waste. So waste that's deposited at the landfills. And the other two sources are our utility charge for the domestic and commercial wheelie bin services, and then the waste levy, which is applied uniformly across the ratepayers per property. So the waste levy basically props up the shortfall in the business unit. So what's collected through the wheelie bin charges and fees and collected at the tip, the waste levy was introduced a number of years ago, basically to fund the network of disposal, transfer station sites and disposal, and offset that. So bit of a background basically of what the business unit is. So looking at preparation of the budget this year, had a couple of challenges that we have come up with, and probably one of the major challenges we faced over the previous year, particularly this year, is increasing waste volumes particularly at our transfer stations. So servicing of those is done internally by council. We've got the roll-on roll-off trucks servicing those transfer stations, bringing the waste back. And we have found that we have had to increase the number of bins, the bulk skip bins at a number of those things, and the frequency of services. So what we've found this year is we are actually doing probably an approximately 28 extra hours a week in servicing these facilities, sort of working it back. We've got two truck and dog setups that we service these facilities with. The last truck we replaced, we kept the replacement truck as a backup. So if there's a breakdown, then with the services isn't interrupted, we could bring the old truck onto line and continue to offer the services. But what we've found is that truck is now providing service. We're needing to utilise it to service a volume of waste that we are collecting. And as we say, it's operating probably 50% or 50 to 70% of a normal truck. That truck was at end of life when it was replaced, so it is offering a big risk to us actually having that truck providing that services, plus the additional sort of man hours. We're often finding the fellas doing split shifts and additional overtime to meet the services. So just the background of that is we actually have in this budget are proposing for to bring on a third truck to meet the services. So in framing the budget, we've looked at a number of different options, but our preferred option is to bring that additional truck into the fleet. The alternative, and I know we've talked through with council, so we have looked at not decreasing the level of service, so maintaining all of the facilities that we do currently have across the region. So in doing that, we do need to bring in a third truck, which will actually provide that additional service, but it will also provide the backup if one of for a truck that needs to be taken out of service for servicing, or if you have breakdowns and that, it gives us that spare capacity. One of the capital works we are doing Maidenwell transfer station, so that's in progress, and so that will come online in next financial year. So that's also going to need to be serviced from at additional work, so that truck will be able to take up that that service. So that's probably one of the big challenges and one of the key components of this the waste budget this year. We have looked at and probably we can talk about. We had the truck and dog for this truck. We do think we can probably, if we just get the truck, we can probably survive without the dog going for this year. But we do expect that to add efficiencies going forward, that may be required. Probably one of the other things that council will talk about is we've done a review through finance. Have done a review of the admin recruitment. So these business units, as I was saying before, we try to operate them as a standalone business. So all of the administration support, the management oversight, the payroll, creditors payments, and all of those administrative functions that are carried out by council on behalf of these business units, we're trying to charge back the business unit to reflect it as a real cost. So there's been a review of those charges, which is in the waste service. Though we were probably getting off relatively cheaply, I think, previously. Manager Patch mightn't agree with me, but so the admin recruitments will see an additional revenue or an additional expense from the waste business unit, and that's just purely reflecting the costs that are associated with that back to the business units, and as council through the entire budget discussion. Oh no, waste services first off the cab, so we can discuss it here, but you will find this in the water and wastewater and fleet and the general operations. It does impact, so it really is just an internal revenue source, but it is just showing that the waste services is funding the admin support. So that's probably, and it's probably the other thing with the waste business unit is the capital works. So we try to, through the surpluses that are raised through the business units, that's what's utilised to fund our capital works. So as I mentioned, Maidenwell Transfer Station or any of the required capital works down the track, any of the legacy landfill, the landfill closures, we will have going out in a number of years. We've got a number of transfer stations. So when some of the landfills start to fill up, we do have to build some bulk transfer stations that will be able to transfer waste back to one of the landfills that has still got spare capacity. So we've got some fairly major expenses that are out in the outer years, sort of looking in that 10 to 20 year time frame. So with the waste service charges, what we try to do is make sure that we are trying to fund some of that future expenses so that we don't get to year 10 and all of a sudden have a multi-million-dollar black hole. So trying to have incremental increases across the board. So just not sure how we want to go this afternoon. The capital works program. So next year we really only have the transfer station at Maidenwell essentially, which is on the books already, and we are required to install it. The only other capital works we have in next year's budget is a weighbridge at Nanango. So this is a requirement from the state with the introduction of the state waste levy. That facility meets the threshold that it is required to have a weighbridge. We're hoping that the state would fund at least a proportion of this, and we have made representations to the state, but as to date we haven't either got a positive response to our request for funding, and also with the levy, there have been funding rounds previously. We did get some funding to do some upgrades prior to the introduction of the state levy 2 years ago, minor crib huts and that sort of thing, but we were hoping that some of that funding might come around. We still are, but this is required in next financial year, so we have actually needed to budget for that in case that funding isn't available from the state. So those are the two capital projects that we're looking at undertaking next year. Any questions? I suppose I would just probably wanted to give a bit of an introduction to the waste services business unit before we get into too much of the details. So,
I think the other day it was mentioned that that we service the bunyias a lot more now than we used to as well. That capacity's grown up there, or that need has grown up at the bunyias. Is that correct?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, that's correct. So it's the gated community up there. So prior to, predates South Burnet, prior to amalgamation, so there was arrangements between the council and the body corporate of the gated communities up there. So each of the properties up at the Bunya Mountains pay a Bunya Mountains utility charge, or so say pay a waste levy. So they don't have a wheelie bin, door-to-door collection. So they have the bulk bins that are located at the front of the gated community. And the arrangement is that what that costs, council will pass that back on to we aggregate the total cost and then split that between the number of property owners and work out a rate for the year. So we've done an assessment over the year, and it does say, particularly this year, there's been additional bins required up there and servicing. So that is costing, it is more than what the current rate charges are. So that is one that we will be proposing to have an increase in that Bunya Mountains waste levy, and it's really offsetting the cost. So, and that's looking at probably a fairly significant. It's I think we've calculated to be a $48 increase on each of those properties, and that's basically just to offset the expense of providing that service.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I have got the modelling paper before me from last week's discussions. Does everybody have a copy of that? Yep. Wondering if we needed a timeout.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Shoemaker. Did anyone want to comment? Have we got that? We can put that up on the screen. Any chance we could get that up? Do we want to look at the revenue first and then go to the expenses, or do we want to look at expenditure first and then come back to revenue? I guess What are your thoughts? As a committee want to run? Do you want to go through the expenditure first and then come back to how much money we need?
Yeah.
Or, yep.
I think it was, the team, as GMO May said, Craig and his team have done an incredible job compiling all of these options and all the information for us. It's all there. We've workshopped it. I've certainly got some questions about it. So if there's an opportunity, maybe as you say, I think expenses first myself. That would be my preference.
So do you want to take 5 minutes? We'll grab a cup of
Get it
tea.
set
I
up.
might, so that's a great suggestion. I might just put up a procedural motion that we adjourn maybe for, and resume. Can we just resume at 2:30? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Let's take a 15-minute break or so. Resume at 2:30. We can bring back our ratings model document from last week. We have a second for that? Thanks, Councillor Jones. Carried unanimously. So we'll close now until resume at 2:30. Thanks, everyone. Okay, so I'll now move that we reopen the meeting at 2:33. Do you have a seconder? Thanks, Councillor Froloff. All in favour? Carried. So meeting now reopened at 2:33 p.m. Thank you. So we're committee. We're at the last item on the agenda, where we're looking at the Waste Services operational budget for 21-22, and in front of us we've got a number of scenarios that have been presented at the last workshop that we had with the waste rate modelling options, and that includes the proposed scenarios for expenses for the 12 months to operate all of our waste facilities, our dumps and collection services. And then we have to look at the revenue that was required, the income that required to be able to fund that. So I just wanted to recommend to the committee that we start off on page 8 with option 2. Now that option 2 on page 8 shows an income statement whereby if you look at the expenses at the bottom, it starts there with what we call recurrent expenses. You can see it starts with depreciation, donations, and works its way down. And you'll see that the total recurrent expenses in the second column, which is the one covered in beige, is the total expenses there, I think, is 6,287,473. So that comes about by that option includes funding the extra truck and dog, but dropping out of the system that 0.5 of a truck, that 28 hours that's currently used on the old truck. So it basically gets made obsolete. We drop it out. We fund an extra new truck and dog, which would replace that. And we also then fund an extra driver for that, which you can't have a truck without a driver. So that's the extra full-time driver to drive the new truck and dog. Of course, includes the extra 2.5% for the EBA increase, which every employee is entitled to, and also covers 2 more utilities, which were previously unbudgeted for, 2 more white fleet for that department. So I just thought we might look at the expenses first, agree on that, and then come back to the income that's required to service those expenses. So didn't want to look at the rating just yet. I thought if we do it bottom up, let's look at what we need to run the department, and then let's, as we say, let's then budget to achieve that outcome. Is everyone happy with that as a process? Mr. CEO, that sound okay?
Yeah, no, it sounds great, Mr. Mayor. The only one I would flag again at the beginning is General Manager O'May mentioned that we could actually space the dog out over the 2 financial years. So which are options which I would think if we can operationally and safely work with the truck this year, then if we fold the dog into the second financial year, as well as we would save that 0.5 of a position. But anyway, just a thought to kick the ball rolling.
Yep, thanks, Mark. So if we were to, so this option 2 includes getting the dog straight away and having the full-time driver with the truck and dog out the back. Okay, so that'd be going straight in. We'd have to look, if you wanted to look at dropping the dog off and just getting the truck without the trailer, we could look at what the plant costs will come down to, if that's what people are thinking. So, yeah, look, open up for discussion. Let's have a talk about it. Councillor Shoemaker, what are your thoughts?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I think picking up on what the CEO and probably GMO May and his team has done since our discussion where we workshop the worst case scenario? That was going to be my first question, was just to GMO May in terms of what are the savings or initiatives that his team has considered in the expenses for his team. So the dog is potentially one. And I've got a couple of other questions after that.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Yeah, certainly. Yeah, that was because we had factored in plant hire. So how the plant hire works, so the fleet will say purchase, so council will purchase the truck and dog and then hire it back. So we have got additional plant hire in there for a truck and dog. So if we don't use the dog, which we don't believe we would need to next financial year, then that could be delayed. We'd certainly make sure that the truck can, we've got 2 dogs already, so we'd certainly make sure the truck could, so that's a reduction, which isn't reflected in these figures, because the models haven't been rerun, but we could reduce the plant hire for the dog component of it. And
So just a couple of thoughts. I've been thinking about this dilemma that we've got, because in reading the report, it says that once Maidenwell comes online, so at the moment the additional truck and dog wasn't purchased because it would only be used 50% of the time, and then once Maidenwell comes online, we expect that to go to 70% of the time, and then we would have that additional 30% utilisation to help support us maintain the other trucks and dogs in the fleet. Probably my question was just in terms of, I wanted to clarify, in terms of the additional truck and dog, is there any option for council under its current EBA to look at the way in which we operate split shifts for those existing trucks to save the purchase of additional truck? I'm proposing, is there any way in which we could run our other truck more hours, our new truck more hours, and split the shifts? Does our EBA give any provision for that?
yeah, we probably could look at it, but your truck, the employee component of the truck, of the plant hire, like there's probably the smaller component of it. So if the truck is still going to be running those hours, you're still going to be paying.
I'm proposing keeping our existing fleet of the two trucks and making up the additional capacity that we need, the 50%, by splitting our shifts.
Yeah, you could. Yeah, we certainly could look at that, but you're still going to running the truck for the additional hours. You're still going to be having additional plant hire costs. So if each of those trucks, instead of doing 45 hours a week now, all of a sudden doing 65 hours a week, you're going to be paying $65. 65 hours of plant hire for the 2 existing trucks, and it probably just brings in that risk of service failure if there is breakdowns and that. But yeah, it's certainly, and yeah, we have to look at penalty rates and those sort of things for the employees through EVs. But yeah, it's something we haven't modelled.
I don't, by all means, though, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I'm just thinking, we've been through our budget in detail and we know what the worst case scenario is, and the reality is we are going to have to make some savings somewhere. And I guess I respect and encourage your team's creative thinking, and certainly understand you're already running quite a fine budget, but I guess just open to different ideas or ideas of operating that might get us some savings for our ratepayers at the end of the day. The other thing I just wanted to ask in terms of contract options for that additional truck and dog, and the only reason why I ask is because the expense of a additional white fleet through our plant fleet review, over time, that has to be costed. So that's an ongoing expense. And I understand our waste is actually increasing, so I don't doubt that you could use the additional equipment. But I guess I was just thinking, is there an option for contracting that additional 0.5 service that we need, and would that be in the short term more cost effective than buying additional fleet?
You could look at contract. I don't know if it would be more cost effective, because you're still going to be paying the contract for the truck. So instead of council hiring a truck to Waste Services and effectively any profit available in that is returned to council rather than the contractor. So short term, if you needed to fix a gap, then you would look at that. But I think long term, then we're better off owning the truck and hiring it to ourselves.
And just my last question, do we have in the plant and fleet review that we've done, is there any additional trucks or trucks that maybe aren't at full capacity in other areas of council's team that we could be looking to use for Waste Services to tow a trailer?
Yeah, no, not that I'm aware of, and I think these will be specialised set up to take the skip bins and that. So there's really effectively a specialist bit of gear. But yeah, and I believe with the fleet, our trucks are well utilised. So yeah, I would think that that's not an option.
And so the staff member that you're asking for the extra full-time driver, I'm just mindful if the truck's only being used at 70% capacity, that's when the Maidenwell transfer facility comes online. There's 30% capacity there maybe that's not full. So I just wondered, in terms of that full-time role, what do you foresee? How will you fill that extra 30%? And is it really needed? Is there options to perhaps use staff from other areas or flex staff in and out with the existing truck drivers in infrastructure?
Yeah, you could. It doesn't matter where the staff member come from. Like, I suppose if we had the 70%, then we would try to look at utilising them for maintenance at facilities, whether it be sign maintenance or repairs. But I suppose worst case scenario, if we did only have 70% or then we could look at additional work. So whether it be in infrastructure or other part of council to pick up those hours. But yeah, generally it could be. Normally we would look at maintenance around in the waste services facilities at the landfills or transfer station, fixing up signs, repairing gates or holes in fences and things. The litter cleanups of like the fellas when they do go to the transfer stations, they will do emu parades and that at times. So you could probably give more time at the moment when they're flat out. They don't get much opportunity to do that. So yeah, the expectation that they would sort of take on additional roles like that.
Yeah, keep going, Councillor. Yeah.
For now, I guess that's really my thinking. I'm actually quite supportive of option 2. The expenses put forward. I understand there's really not a lot that we can do in terms of the materials space, and the plant and services really does make up the bulk of your costs. So there's really, I can see there's very little fat in this budget, but I guess I can see the only way to really make savings is maybe to look at the way in which we're operating. And certainly, the truck, we're talking $82,000 for employee benefit costs for the EBA increase and the additional full-time driver, and an increase of $295 for plant costs due to that truck and trailer, plus the 2 white fleet previously unbudgeted. I did have a question just around that white fleet. Are there options in our existing fleet to pull fleet from other areas to support the waste services team?
Thanks, Councillor. Yeah, and I might just add to that. I think there could well be capacity to shift some cost from another department onto utes if we brought them across. Yeah, so that cost would still be there, but we might actually pick the savings up in another department. I think that's something we can explore as we look at the other departments. If they've got excess utes, rather than buying 2 new utes, do we just move them sideways? These guys pick up the extra cost and then saves the other department. Yeah. The other thing, just looking at your figures you said there, I've run calculations here. On page 10, it shows that the extra driver is 64.8 thousand. So that's almost 65,000 for the extra driver. So out of the 82, out of that 82,000 for extra employee costs, 64.8 is the extra driver. And if you look at the truck and the 2 utes, of the 295 for the truck and the 2 utes, 232 of that is the truck when you do the calculations there. So the truck's an extra 232,000. I just wanted to explore a bit further what Councillor Shoemaker raised there, Peter. around the split shift thing. If we had to have the 2 truck and dog set up, what hours do the guys currently work, the drivers, sorry? What are they sort of hours at the moment?
Well, standard hours are just an 8-hour shift. Yeah,
Is that like a 6 till 3 or?
yeah.
Because there'd be workplace health and safety restrictions about working in the dark, wouldn't there? I mean, they've got to get
Yeah,
out to
and
the dumps and unload. And
the other thing
we'd have to
they
be conscious of that if you wanted to look at split shifts, would we? Yep.
The issue, yeah, I suppose fatigue management you wouldn't because you'd be doing split shifts. So you'd be looking at different employees rather than extending the hours for the truck. But yeah, no, it'd certainly be like to do something like that. We would need to talk to staff, talk to the unions about
Just
industrial
exploring whether
arrangement.
we had 3 drivers but 2 trucks. I mean, that's all I'm exploring. Two setups but 3 drivers, and then the vehicle gets its hours up. I don't know. It might not be practical, but I'm certainly not suggesting we change anything to do with staff or awards. That's a whole different space that I don't want to go into here. It was more about making sure that we got that machinery running 12 hours a day rather than 8 hours a day or something like that. Just exploring that really. That's all at this stage. Yeah, sorry, Councillor Henson.
Henson leads to my question of we have a truck, the 2.5, and how we get to that one truck, which is end of life, it's 50%. There's obviously a driver in that truck at the moment. So why can't that driver go towards third truck, which would not then be the full-time employee? Would that not be correct? If there's already a person in a truck. It's filling in that 50% with the one that's end of life. And secondly, certainly with a truck and a dog, the savings and efficiency with a truck and a dog would be far greater than just, if we were to source a truck, it's no more to put a dog on the back in initially, apart from the cost to get it. So I guess the gentleman or the person driving that end-of-life truck at the moment is already there. So why can we not use him? And that full-time employee rate, would that not drop down? Or is he engaged in another department and just been doing that because of our waste disposal has increased that much?
Councillor, if I may, just one of the issues that we have with this, and I must admit I'm supportive of the extra person, is the waste guys are consistently in our overtime and accrued leave. Just sending a note to the PNC, is that we could probably pull an overtime report for this. We should be able to anyway, so irrationally off the top of my head. But they're consistently, this section is consistently in our leave, over. They're almost running an extra person in overtime and accrued leave, if that makes sense. So not I'll throw back to Peter for the truck dog type arguments, but certainly as far as staffing, we've got the resource issues. The question of the split shift would have to be looked at. There's lower local area work agreements and things like that, and certainly it's not a negative or anything, but these are processes where there's a consultation phase and we have to talk to the staff. So is it possible, depending on how we're to structure it, but yeah, there are options available to us. We just have to look at what the ideal outcome was and what we're looking at. But I think where Pete was going before with the 2 trucks is we're probably anyway. Yeah, I'll let Peter go on the truck and how much usage and plant usage it's got. But certainly with the staffing, with the fatigue and everything else, is we consistently are running overtime and accrued leave in this space.
I certainly. My argument is not for the additional staff. I agree with the Mayor and Councillor Henson. I actually think an additional staff member, certainly if you're saying, and I believe you, when you're saying that overtime is a problem, fatigue is a problem, I absolutely believe you. My argument is more, well, if we've got 3 people and 3 trucks, then over the course of if a shift is 8 hours, then in a full day we're only getting 8 hours. Well, actually a lot less. By the time you take breaks out and travel time, you're actually getting a lot less out of that truck. And my thinking is more around, if we're working a 9-day fortnight or an RDO fortnight, is there a way in which we could use the 2 trucks and dogs that we have that meets, certainly at the moment, if we're only looking at 50% until the Maidenwell transfer facility is up and running, is there, and we understand with the Maidenwell transfer facility, when you first start a transfer facility, from the discussions that we've had, they're not always used at full capacity. It takes a bit of time for people to use them. So we may actually have a little bit of time up our sleeve to look at options to, you know, I'm just thinking if you've got drivers spaced at different areas, and if you've got a new driver that you're bringing on, maybe in more of a casual capacity or something like that. I would have to follow your lead there, CEO Mark, but maybe you could actually get more hours and certainly keep your staff member safe, because that should always be our priority. We're not arguing that, but maybe you could get more hours out of the way in which we structure those shifts. And maybe, you know, I know we already change our hours from summer to winter because of the temperature. I saw the notice come out to say, you know, our fellas start a little bit later in wintertime due to and earlier in summer. So I guess I think there could be some work done there. $295,000 for fleet that's not potentially going to be used at full capacity is a concern for me. They're my thoughts anyway. I'm not absolutely believe we need the service. I think the rationale is there. I guess I'm just challenging the team to think a little bit differently about the problem.
No issues at all, Councillor. And I'll yield to greater knowledge, but the waste team starts generally about 5:30. They're in a different cycle to the roads troop, which, when you think about it, makes sense because they've got to get around, pick up the bins, and so they're on a different cycle to the others. Just for, I think there was a question before about what time they start, so it's 5 or 5:30. Yeah.
Thanks. Yes.
I guess the other thing we want to be well aware of is how much is our waste expanded in the last probably 12 months or more. And I know I passed guys on the road and I made comment last week about some of our waste facilities have doubled, and one being out in my neck of the woods has doubled in the last 12 months. So I can certainly understand there's a waste department is under the pump, and certainly the likes of a truck and a dog would be seriously efficient. And if our overtime is on the top of the list, or one of the departments which is on the top of the list with overtime and leave and whatnot, I think sometimes more is less.
So in the instance where we brought the additional truck and dog, let's say we do that and it's only being used at the moment for 50% of the time, is there capacity, does any other team across council, are they able to extract any value from the purchase of that equipment, or will it just purely be for waste? Will it be another machine? Because when I listened to the plant and fleet review, the feedback was that there are machines parked up in the yard. So I want to make sure this isn't another machine that's parked up in the yard, that it is being fully utilised.
Yeah, I think, to be fair, it would be just for the waste. So effectively it could be parked up, as you say. Probably just answering a couple of questions. Yeah, agree. Mark hit it on the head that there isn't an extra fella that's sitting around driving this. This is the current crews that are doing overtime and additional hours and taking toil. So that's where the extra person is coming from. So that would be a saving. So we haven't so we don't budget for that. We're budgeting for the additional officer, but that would see a reduction in those. Well, the trouble is you're not seeing it now because you're getting these big leave balances. So you're not seeing the costs until someone has to go on leave, and then you're trying to backfill them. The dog question, I suppose we're looking at it. It's one that could be, I could see it could sit up, and that's what we're suggesting. Yes, when we're running out to Braguda or Geelong and that, then you are taking the dogs. But when we are servicing Kingaroy, then you're probably going to, if you just need to do one bin, you're going to take an empty bin out with the truck. And so it's and the fellas have got the programs of which transfer stations and which bins they're servicing. So currently the truck that we're using hasn't got a dog. So that's probably why we're saying we think we could do the program where we could actually get away with the truck. Obviously going out to the further we go, then we always make sure that you're doing the runs that you can take the dogs. But yeah, that's probably the only comment around that. But if you're just taking one bin, then you just need the truck. So that's where we would be trying to run the roster, that you could just utilise the truck. Certainly, if they had the dog, there would be times where it would come in handy. But again, I might say if the truck's utilised 50% of the times, then to be honest, we might say that the dog's utilised 25% of the time. And that's where we're just at that critical balance we've got too much for the current fleet and probably just haven't quite got to the to full utilisation of that of the extra gear. But what it would actually do is bring in that risk, because the trouble is when we do have a breakdown, and if something major goes on that, particularly the older truck, then that's where you will have a loss of service and backlog.
Thanks, Peter. So what I'm hearing from you there is that we are at some point in time going to have a need for the third truck and dog, but we're not there yet. What we're looking for at the moment is somewhere around 50% plus. That's the demand at this stage. Now, if we start at 5:30 with the current 2 trucks and dogs, those drivers should be finished with an 8-hour shift and a 1 hour for lunch by 2:30. So does that mean that from 2:30 to 5:30, where you have currently got 2 trucks and dogs sitting in the compound for that 3 hours each, so that's 6 hours of machine time that's not being utilised. Now, I'm just putting this out there theoretically because this is what accountants do, to challenge you guys. So that means that's 30 hours a week that we've in daylight time between 2:30 and 5:30 that we've got 2 trucks there. So 30 hours a week. 30 hours a week is 75% of a 40-hour week. So would it be possible to have 2 part-timers that work from 2:30 to 5:30, 2 drivers, they get 3 hours a day each, they work permanent, part-time or casual or whatever, and they drive those 2 trucks from 2:30 to 5:30? Could that work, or logistically, would that just be a nightmare to program to get across the areas? Just want to put that out there as an option as to whether that could work logistically.
Oh, yeah. I think theoretically, but I think you've hit it on the head logistically, because if there is any breakdown or like if that truck doesn't get back in time, and you've also got time for servicing and maintenance, you could have someone sitting in there in the yard waiting for an hour and a half for the truck to come back, or it certainly in theory could work. That there is risks around it, so they might get back early. They might,
But do the trucks often not get back and clock off by 2:30?
Well, it certainly depends what they where they are going to, and that too, I suppose. So we try work the run that they're actually going out picking up full bins. Sort of that's the other thing is if the person's available to go and service the Bargooda transfer station in that afternoon and can do a run out, but the bins are only at half full, then you sort of, I suppose we try time our servicing that the bins are getting close to full.
Yes.
That would be the other risk, is that we're running servicing things because that's the time we've got available to service those transfer stations, and they're only half full that time. So we certainly would need to look at some modelling with the guys.
Some modelling on that. And Peter, where are the trucks stored at the moment?
In Kingaroy.
Kingaroy. So we've got 2 trucks in Kingaroy that come back. They are supposed to come back at 2:30, don't always. But if the fellas were to work their 8 hours with no overtime, they would be back at 2:30 in the afternoon, both trucks in Kingaroy. It's a central depot. Is that what you're saying? I guess, look, I'm going to continue to do this because we started with an $8 million deficit, and I don't think we can afford not to turn over every stone. So please forgive me for the fact that we're continuing to explore these options. Not wanting to do something that's unrealistic, but I think if there's a potential to save $232,000 with an extra truck and dog, happy with the extra wages cost, because we don't want people to burn themselves out on overtime, but whether we can get more value out of our machinery, I don't know, just putting it out there.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I think without having the exact numbers in, I think you'll find the afternoons, that's when the overtime, they're running the trucks now in the afternoon, hence the overtime. But anyway, we'll pull an overtime report down and see. So they also work their RDOs. So we have, and this is the leave accrual. So the 9-day fortnight. And again, Councillor, it's a great debate and really good questions. Thank you. Appreciate the challenge. And I know that you weren't taking taking aim. That's terrible language, but you weren't talking about the staffing. The staffing is one aspect of it, and then how you utilise that machinery is the other. But there's certainly the stuff I've seen coming through. There's certainly a lot of time off that is being worked, and then with the annual leave and everything else, it's a question of having a look at what those trucks are doing in the afternoon.
Absolutely, Mark. And I think, we may be able to get to a position where we can have people finishing when they're supposed to at 2:30 and not having to do overtime and extra time off in lieu, and start to look after their long-term health and welfare. If we can try and be smarter about our rostering somehow, I don't know. Sorry, Hook, you were next on.
Yeah, look, sorry, I turned that off. My question's probably been answered in the fact that if it was 3 hours a day, 6 per truck, 6 hours, 40 odd hours, that's not the case if there's so much overtime in that facility. So, my question's probably been answered with the comments for doing you and CEO Mark. Thank you.
Hearing you, but I mean, that would already be in the original budget, and we've provided extra in the budget for the 2.5%, which would be on top of the overtime that's been paid. So, that's got to be accounted for as well. So,
Yeah, and certainly I think that's the case, and I guess this is the challenge that I'm sure all of us will be putting to our team. I think we've got an incredible group of people here. And if it were my business and this was my business decision, I would not be buying another truck and dog. I'd be looking at every other option first. And so certainly I'd welcome, I can't give you a decision on this today. I'd really like to see GM O'May and his team go back and have some discussions about how this might look or what this could look like, and then bring us back some scenarios as to how we might be able to get those additional staff and utilise our existing truck and trailer fleet that little bit more, just get that more utilisation out of it, so that, you can see the landscape is there will be more waste, and we may need more into the future. But we've also had a discussion about recycling, and we've also had a discussion about, our contracts will be up for review next year. So I think there could be other parts to this puzzle that I would probably like us to think about. And I'd also really like to see some more information about that white fleet. I know during COVID we kept a lot of vehicles that maybe we were starting to get rid of because people had to drive one person in a vehicle. So I know people in our community thought that was council wasting resources, but that certainly wasn't the case. I think if there's an opportunity to look at our white fleet and see if there's any other department or team that may have some white fleet available to support these operations. And the other thing I'm probably really curious about as well, further to your comments about parking in Kingaroy, when you're servicing an area as big as the South Burnett, is that really the best use of our time, paying somebody to come back? I know the truck and the trailers have to come back to the Kingaroy Waste facility, but is there, if we've got employees in Wondai or something like that, would it be better to park at one of our other depots? Like, really look at how we are servicing the 17 facilities that we have and get best value out of the resources that we have. So I understand that might look at, the roster and things change because, as you say, Pete, waste isn't necessarily, a steady stream. You don't know exactly what you're going to get each week, but surely after all this time operating these facilities, I think we've got a pretty good idea. And I think if we're not going down the track of closing facilities, which is, we've looked at that option. It turned out if we close waste management facilities, it really didn't save us any money because the trucks are running anyway. So how do we get best value out of the trucks that are on the road? And maybe get a little bit more out of them just for this moment until we've got that Maidenwell transfer facility and we can justify that 100% utilisation for our staff. Maybe in between we might find a better way.
Yeah, and I guess what I was proposing is that something that could be maybe even just a 1-year option until we scale up to that additional, and I would expect that probably in 1 year or 2 years, at least we're going to need the full 3 trucks and dogs. But in the meantime, is there something else we can do to get maximum value out of that machinery? We're running that machinery at its maximum capacity. in the meantime. And I guess I'm absolutely supportive of spending the extra 64,000 on staff, if that's what we've got to do to make sure that our staff aren't burning out, that we've got the right number of people. But machinery, would prefer to see that we're pushing the machinery up around the hours it should be running per day, if that's possible. But I understand, Pete, it comes down to a programming issue as to how we can program all those facilities, because it's a big area we've got to get across. I'm cognizant of that as well, so.
Just through you, Mr Mayor, a lot of comment around the old truck. Can you tell me how old that truck is and how close it is to being needed to be replaced due to hours and time, Pete? Have you got those details? So it's 10 years old? So has it reached its... Yeah.
That's true, but we're proposing another one, aren't we?
You'd have to be prepared to sweat the old backup truck for another 12 months.
Yep.
That's all, yeah.
Yeah, so again, hearing comments earlier in the conversation about safety and concerns for our staff, working with safe machinery and all that. We've been through this with the loader at the dump and all that sort of stuff. We're trying to look at other options and all that sort of stuff. I hear what everyone's saying, and I'm all for it. We've got to get efficiency, we've got to get savings, we've got a hell of a budget to try and deliver, and we need to look at every aspect of where we can try and possibly save money. But I do have concerns when we're starting to talk, 10-year-old machinery and that sort of stuff, and there's sort of legislative stuff around that. Yes, I know that. So I guess, Pete, this truck, if we were to keep it for another 12 months, in your views, would that be any issues with safety? Is the truck serviceable? Is it obviously would be safe because the guys do all that work?
I'll go first. And it was a good discussion at the time about the loader. The truck is it old? Yes. The question is probably more around its maintenance issues, because if it's not fit for purpose and it's not safe, it's tagged out. So yeah. As far as I'll throw to Peter on the more practical side of it, but absolutely any of this plant and machinery, we can't make it clear enough to the staff and to others. If the thing is unsafe, it doesn't get used. So is it safe? Yes. Its maintenance side of it, I can't answer so confidently.
So in the report, it actually says it's spending 50% of its time being serviced, so it's letting the team down as far as, yeah. Yeah, I wanted to support Councillor Shoemaker in the logistics of having everyone drive back up to Kingaroy. When you look at the size of our region and whether we could look at splitting and maybe having one base somewhere else. But the other one I'm questioning is that you said that you weren't always sure whether the waste facilities were full or not, and you might not always go out there, but there must be some mechanism to know whether they are or not. I thought there was sort of like there'd have to be standard days you went out there, because otherwise you'd have to drive out and check and then come back. Like how do you get around the fact that you're saying that sometimes they're not full?
No. So that's how the fellas do service the facilities now. So they know from the waste streams, and so they know that, say, when they go out to that facility, it is going to be getting close to full. What I was mentioning is if we had, say, the part-time and the truck was only available at this time to do the extra servicing, whether there'd be a risk. So you would try stagger it that you weren't going there, but it was just a sort of, we're saying that there could be a risk if the time that the truck to do that additional servicing was available, whether the facility had reached that time. So they try to do the run so that they are getting there when the bins are full, but obviously that can't always be possible, because some will have much. But it was just it'll just make it a difficult, or more difficult, just rostering in that 3-hour afternoon. So when you're doing the split shift, you just have to finish off that run. And the fellas currently do that sort of thing. So if that old truck, one of the trucks down, then they are required to sort of run extra split shifts and that. So yeah, they currently do it. It'd be a matter of sort of what you're talking about is basically doing that as normal operations, as continuing that rather than just in when you're down. The only other issue, I suppose, with the trucks is looking as if we have, like, so that truck is 10 years, so say it's a 10-year life and we replace that truck. If we move to this system, which isn't necessarily an issue, but just something to be aware of, like the plant hire is still going to be additional, so waste will be paying for the additional plant hire, but those trucks will only last 6 years rather than 10 years because they're going to be doing additional work, they're going to be costing more. So you will be replacing your 2 trucks over time. So yeah, from a waste unit, I'm not sure whether there'll be, certainly from a capital cost for council, there won't be the additional truck, but yeah, the costs of those truck hours will still be being picked up by the waste unit.
So I just want to confirm, so in the report here it says, another significant impact has been the increased waste volumes experienced at the various waste facility waste services, which has caused this section to be currently operating 2.5 roll-on, roll-off trucks. How this might be possible, you ask? The truck that is being utilised at 50% is one of the trucks that had recently been replaced. The replaced truck was initially held back as a backup truck so that the 2 primary trucks, so we have 3 trucks, yes, could be taken offline for urgent repairs, and this and normal scheduled maintenance could normally not happen as the trucks are fully utilised every day due to demand. However, demand across the regions for waste facilities has seen the need for this replaced truck to be used in service 50% of the time. So we have 3 trucks and they're being used, you know, we've got 2.5 capacity. So I guess what we're saying is, by no means do I mean stretching, I'm saying retire your 10-year-old truck. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying investigate retiring that truck. Last week, a couple of weeks ago, I went to Caloundra and I saw their waste services team out at night. So there must be some sort of provision, some lever that we can pull, because for some workers to get that flexibility, and I've seen this myself, I know a lot of women truck drivers who actually like night shifts because they can help get their kids off today, they can find that flexibility in their day. So for some people, working a night shift actually works. And so I just think it's a way, if we buy a whole nother truck and have then 3 trucks and 1 sitting around, and we're not looking at our programming or options to maybe get more out of those assets, I myself really just want to understand that some of that work's been done, that we're not just buying a truck because we think, you know, and we'll just sit on it for the next 12 months. I mean that with the utmost respect. I just don't know if we really need the 3 trucks at this point in time, and I would just like to understand if there can be some work done in that space around scheduling, rostering, these sorts of things. Bring some recommendations back to council, maybe some scenarios, more information in that regard. That's my request.
So just on that then, so Susan, you know, people were saying we're still going to have to pay for the trucks if they use the extra hours. So rather than having 3 trucks running 8 hours each, gives us our 24 hours a day. If we only had 2 trucks, but they're running 12 hours each, for example, does either scenario, so do we save money by just running 2 trucks rather than 3? Are they booked out on a daily rate or are they booked on an hourly rate? How does that work in terms of your charging back from fleet back to these guys?
So that's what I was saying is that waste services will be paid for 24 hours of plant hire. So whether it's 2 12s or 3 8s, waste services will pay the same.
Okay, so if you pay for 24 hours on a truck, but if you only use it for 8, then you've got that 16 hours downtime that you're not using it.
That's not what you're saying.
No?
No. Are you
That's what you're
talking
saying, aren't you? You're paying a daily rate. You pay for 24-hour access to that truck.
for each truck? No. That's for 3 trucks, isn't it?
Yeah, no, an hourly rate. No, just saying if we hire the truck for 8 hours 3 trucks for 8 hours gives you 24 hours.
So you pay on hourly rate?
So pay hourly rate for the.
Oh, so your fleet costs aren't going to reduce. You'll still pay the extra $232,000 if you're running those trucks for 12 hours a day rather than 8. Really?
And
That's interesting.
The fleet operators also advised as well with the extra hours and that they did flag it that we had to be very careful that the higher usage of the vehicles would cause us, instead of say a 10-year recommended turnover, would reduce it back several years, and we would be replacing plant more consistently. But on the other side of the ledger, you are actually using it more, so it really does balance it out.
But Susan, if we're not only going to do this for 1 year, for 12 months, to buy ourselves time to review what we're doing here, that's not going to necessarily, it might add a few extra hours, but we're not looking about doing this over a 10-year cycle. You know, when you're saying having to replace them more often, this might put so many extra hours on that it wouldn't otherwise got, but it's only going to be potentially for 1 year. I can't see it as a position in 12 months from not needing the third truck.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I thought you were suggesting that we do like do a moving shift where we're sort of utilising the plant virtually for 24 hours a day. It's actually...
Oh, no. What I was saying is though that you might say, well, you work, there's a shift in the morning that goes from 5:30 to 2:30, and then there's another shift in the afternoon that might go from 3 till 6. And then you have 2 permanent part-timers that do to 3 to 6. So then those trucks are running from 5:30 in the morning till 6 at night. So they're doing a 12-hour day, basically, each truck is, and it's packed away at 6 o'clock in the afternoon. Yeah, so then you've got three FTEs, but running 2 trucks. That was just a concept.
So to summarise, so we can going forward, where the purchase of the truck or the capital will be in the fleet budget for the sake of this today. So where I've got my notes is, can I be bold and say we're all agreed on the employee? Yep, so that's fine. So the plant cost is the bit that's needs more work, but that's where the questions have been raised around. And the capital the capital purchase of it will come back in the fleet. If we, again, Mr. Mayor, if I'm being pushy, I'm sorry, but even if we can get bits of this locked down today, so we can continue to model and bring this stuff back. Further expenses, Peter, in there besides your plant and your in particularly in I think option 2 we're still talking about, or scenario 2, option 2. Is there anything else in expenses that you need to feed in? It's really just the plant. That would be the plant hire. That would be the bit that would be up in the air. Not a trick question, but yeah. Is there anything else you need to bring to attention?
So just while Pete's waiting, so we're talking, we've currently got 3 trucks. We're talking, we want to get down to 2. And so the purchase of a new truck is, are we still talking that? Are we still thinking about buying a new truck and going down to 2 trucks and getting rid of the other 2? Is that an option, or is that?
The decision, we've got the 3 trucks is correct at the moment. So if the status quo remains, we've got an old truck plus 2. So the purchase of a new truck and replacement, we could finalise that, I suspect, in the fleet, because that'll become part of the fleet budget. What you're talking about here is the operational spend for plant hire. So whether you go to Coates Hire and hire a truck for 2 weeks, or being just example, not real, or figurative, not real. So we're talking about an operational spend. So partly where I'm coming from is that Peter and Craig are given an operational budget, and then they come back and say, okay, if you don't get the 345,000 or you only get 150 of that, how do you make this work to deliver the services? Certainly, as I said, I just wanted to pin down that we're all agreed on the employee, so that's 64K, great. We'll lock that in and feed that into the numbers, and then it's how much of that, again, correct me if I'm hearing you wrong, but how much of that 345 can be wheeled back?
I think that's spot on, Mr. CEO. How much of that 345 can be wheeled back in that plant line where we've got in plant now, we've got there that figure there, Selena. How much of that could be wheeled back when we get to CapEx, if we weren't to acquire the 3rd truck?
Through you, Mr. Mayor,
That'll
I'd
be
have
the
to
question.
talk to Craig.
Everything else is status
Yeah.
quo, I think, as Mark said. Yeah.
Sorry, I'd have to talk to Craig because I take over his I take over his model once he's done the numbers, and then I look at how much we need to rate to actually cover that expenditure. So I'd need to have a chat to Craig and find out how he could make that work. Because he said in that exec summary that the current 0.5 truck is struggling with the 28% or whatever it is that it's doing. So yeah, it's hard to know what that would come back to without having his input into it.
I just had a question, sorry.
So can we come back to that?
Yeah.
Because I just want to come back to Susan again. So I think there's consensus around the room, happy to spend the extra money on the wages because we know that we're short on labour in this space. As Mark said, I'm not hearing anyone complain about that. But it's this plant line, Susan. So if we have extra hours available, however that's done, that's an operational matter for P&C and the department. We just put the money in the budget. Is there scope though to reduce that plant budget that Waste spends? So that's if we don't get the third truck, does that plant figure come down, or do we still have to pay that anyway because we're running 2 trucks for greater hours? I'm still a bit confused around that question.
Yeah. That's your operational budget there, Mr. Mayor. So that will, and I'm happy to be corrected, that will be consistent. Your purchase of your new vehicle will come out of capital.
Yes, but your hire charges, your plant hire line,
Yes.
well, if we're hiring 2 trucks, not 3,
Yes.
still my question, I'm a bit confused about it. Does that
Yeah.
come down because now we're only hiring 2 trucks, not 3
Correct.
from your plant?
That
people?
will also impact on our plant and fleet budget there because that will reduce our revenue, like GM may have alluded to. That stays within the organisation, so they actually pay us to use the plant.
Yes, but you won't have the depreciation or the service
Well, that's true.
or the registration or the insurance, will you, on that third
No.
truck?
Correct.
So you'll also save on those costs.
That's true.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I think, through you, Mr. Mayor, you probably hit it. If you had the 2 trucks running longer hours, then you would have the opportunity to review those plant hire costs. So particularly you're looking at a better efficiency over those two trucks rather than the 3. But yeah, for whatever hours that you're doing is you're paying the plant hire for those trucks. So the 28 hours have to get paid for, whether it's a third truck or the 2 extra ones doing the extra hours. So we'll have to really just look at how that could be rostered in to fit all of the hours that's required sort of in a run that can be done with the 2 trucks and also keeping in mind they've got to be probably done within the daylight hours, the servicing transfer stations at night, particularly.
But if you were paying the same amount for 2 trucks as you are for 3, 24 hours worth of trucks per day, then Susan's getting the same revenue, 24 by whatever the hourly rate is, $100 an hour or whatever. But Susan, you're not going to have the expenses. So you're going to not have insurance, rego, depreciation.
Correct.
So you actually would be you could make some savings over in your budget because we're looking at the whole organisation here, are we not? So we might still have to provide this budget to Craig, but we might be able to save some in plant. So what I'm really hearing then is that that really this is what's here in option 2 is what Craig's going to need, whether you run 2 trucks or 3. It'll only be your operational budget that changes, and then it'll be just a CapEx decision, as Mark said, as to whether we buy the 3rd truck or not. But his budget won't change because his plant costs will change. Will still be 24 hours by whatever the rate is, whether it be 2 or 3. That's correct, isn't it? So really, we're in a position to be able to move forward with this, I would have thought, today, are we not?
Yeah. Just a comment on that. Just the additional plant hire we've got in there, just in that option 2 you're looking at. So we've factored in the new truck, but where we haven't made the adjustment for the 0.5 that we're using now will come off. So that will reduce. Like that's got to come out. It just hasn't been modelled out yet.
I think it has, Pete. That's 113,000 coming out on the 3rd column.
That one?
That's your 3rd column where
yeah.
Selena's dropped that out now.
Oh,
yeah.
Sorry.
Sorry, Pete. Sorry to correct you, but yeah. 113 comes out, and that's where it was worth a try, Pete, yeah. So, yeah, it has. You can see it reduces from 1.1 million down to the 898, which is the 0.5 old truck going out of the system. Yeah, sorry, Danita.
Yeah, sorry to play the devil's advocate, but fine, this all sounds great. My only issue would be that if something happened to one of these trucks, what would be our backup? Like, what would happen? Like, if one of these trucks broke down drastically, was off the road for, you know, a week or something, waiting on parts, what would happen?
If you had two and you didn't have a spare backup like the old tenor, you would hire. You would have to go and find a hire truck.
But
You would rent it from another, like councils have swapped out trucks before. Anyway, yeah, it would be a problem that would have to be solved to continue service. And your first port of call, I would think anyway, would be automatically to look to hire to fill the gap.
I thought that they were fit for purpose, like they're particular trucks. Can you just get them? You'd have to get them from another council, would you? Or?
Oh, it varies. I mean, like there would be. I know in different councils I've had, when other councils have got themselves in trouble, we've hired I won't say it's not uncommon for a council to keep an older style truck. And anyway, rhetorical, a figurative question, but yeah, however you did it, if you had two trucks and you had no other trucks, you would have to either not deliver the service or hire or borrow. That would be where you'd be at.
I find it hard to see how we can do this for 12 months without sweating the old truck and keeping it in the shed as a backup, because it'd be crazy to have to go out and hire a third truck. If you can't stop waste services on a daily basis. But look, Kathy, could you take your light off, please?
Yep.
Thank you.
Oh.
Because I know Ros is trying to get on and she can't. So Ros, did you want to jump in, and we'll come back to you, Kirsty?
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to point out too, though, option 2 is the more equitable option out of all these options, because it's distributed more evenly across the rateable residence properties, as opposed to those that have a wheelie bin. We're not double dipping into the wheelie bin for this one. So the ones that, as they say here, option 2, due to this option being more equitable as the cost is distributed more evenly across all rateable properties, as opposed to those who have also have a wheelie bin service being loaded up twice. This option doesn't double dip on those with a wheelie bin service. The primary users of the council's regional and remote transfer stations are residents without any wheelie bin service. So applying the increase on the council's waste management levy includes a contribution from these residents. So I believe option 2 is the more equitable and fair one across the board.
Thanks, Ros. And you're starting to get into the rating section now, the top line, the income, which we'll come to shortly and feed into that. But any more discussion on expenditure before we summarise that? Because...
Yeah, just and great conversation. Thank you everyone for their contributions. Just in terms of that white fleet, I was just trying to understand, and I probably just wanted to understand more about, so we have 2 vehicles, one's for the coordinator and one's for the waste management officer. So I just wanted to understand what are we currently doing in that space, and is there any option to actually have a look at our fleet and look at how we might be able to use existing vehicles?
Thanks, Councillor. Through you, Mr. Mayor. The status of our white fleet review at the moment is the 3 general managers and the CEO have been given a list of all of their white fleet within their respective areas. We've also been given the structure, corporate structure, showing what fleet is attached to which officer, and where the coordinator of the plant and fleet is engaging with P&C, People and Culture, to find out if there's any contractual agreements or any of those, to make sure that we're not stepping on any issues there, as far as that would get us into a little bit of hot water. And from there, we will, the GMs will come back with a recommendation to say that with their, for example, gardening crew, and I'm just saying this as an example, maybe in Wandai or something, if they have X amount of white plant, is it more equitable that they only have the 2, or, to get their things. So that's all under review. The thing as well will be the policy and the procedure attached to the plant review as well. And so it's a beast in itself because there is a lot of legacy verbal issues that we have to deal with where plant has been verbalised as part of someone's employment, but there's no actual evidence of that. So we're wading through all of that at the moment. First sweep there, I think there's several easy wins with some white fleet that we can look at, but we've got to do it properly. There are, like industrial relations wise, we must do this properly. But there, I agree, there's savings there, and we've identified some failures in process and that are, like I said, easy wins. For example, Peter, General Manager O'May there, and I've been discussing there's 2 white vehicles as an example out at the dams there that were held back because of COVID things there. We're looking for more of a purpose-built unit that would service the need, the units being serviced and that, and straight away there's 2 white fleet. There's been some staff movements that now will be put back into the pool and sold that will be surplus to needs. So that's where we're at the moment, Council. Like I said, it's a huge job. There's a lot of emotional attachment to things there when people have been used to this. So we've got to be make sure that we're doing this correctly. Yeah.
Thanks,
We are
Susan. I've
working
actually
on
got.
it.
Oh, sorry. You can. Got an RFI in the system where I've asked for an explanation against every white fleet, where I've asked for a reason required to be completed on every single vehicle. And because our white fleet does cost us about $600,000 in depreciation alone, I think you can probably double that if you add rego insurance from my quick calculations. So, there could be $1.5 million there we spend on white fleet. And of course, there might not be huge savings, but Susan, where that request has got that reason required, if that's a contractual, it's part of their employment contract, it just needs to say that. It just needs to say HR required or something simple like that. We can't touch those vehicles, obviously. So they're going to be off limits. It's only going to be the ones that we can look at where they're not attached to a HR contract. But Council, there's no scope to touch those that are attached to contracts.
No. And hence the involvement with people and culture there, that they will let us know which ones so that we make sure that we avoid any of that sort of privacy issues as well.
Don't want any other information other than just to say HR, something like that. Don't want any more information than that. And just so we know that they're off limits, because we don't want to be breaching any EBAs or any industrial awards or any arrangements that have been entered into either verbally or contractually, Mr. CEO. I don't think any councillor wants to go down that path and create any industrial issues for you guys. So,
and this does lead on to a bigger, it opens other avenues there where we may have to look at things. It becomes a bigger picture. For example, there, if we have pool vehicles, for example, we just recognise or have a number there for the pool vehicles. At the depot, for example, Kingaroy Depot, there's no parking for staff. Where are they going to park their cars and that? So we're going to have to be, if we take away, say, commuter use from council employees, and I'm not saying we're going to, I'm just giving you these scenarios that it is a bigger thing than just slicing plant, that in the instance the staff have to drive to work prior to accessing a pool vehicle. Where are they going to park their vehicles for a start? So does council, is that an extra expense for council then to go and get a bigger car park? Because at the moment, Kingaroy is at capacity down there. So these are the bigger things. This is what now there seems to be a limb growing here and limb growing there, that we're finding the deeper we look, there's all of these other things that we have to consider as well. So where we think we're saving in one place, we're actually looking at more expenditure in another area.
Thanks, Susan. Lynelle, would you mind just scrolling that down, option 2 for us? So I'll just back up, sorry, Lynelle, just to there, just down a bit more. We can see the bottom line. So it seems to me, and I think this is what CEO Mark was really saying, articulating very well, 6.287,473, that's going to be the recurring expense if we sign up to the extra wages, whether we have 3 trucks or 2, because we're going to have to hire the extra hours anyway. So the decision around the trucks really is a plant and fleet CapEx decision to be had later. So I think, as Mark said, we can really move forward with that bottom line figure. The decision now, I think we need to turn to, and Roz's raised there, is looking at our fees and charges and revenue, our rating model. So are we happy to go to that now? Sign that off and then go to that? Yep. Thank you.
The last point before we move off, I know that the 2 white vehicles, I just want to make a comment. So those vehicles were in the fleet, and part of the white plant review is we are actually finding that say vehicles that haven't been booked out properly. So we're actually improving our booking out procedures. So these are vehicles that have been there, but we're actually making sure that we're 100% budgeting for them, where previously we might have booked it out for an hour, whereas it's sitting available for someone for the 8 hours. So no Craig's trying to be full cost on these things. So yeah, these aren't new vehicles, but they're actually, we're making sure that they are actually being budgeted for. The actuals were getting costed to the budget over time, but yeah, as we're improving our fleet, making sure people are booking out, we're picking up that we haven't been budgeting fully for these vehicles, even though they've been available for use.
But Peter, what you're saying to us just before we finish and move on from that 6.287 million is that the coordinator of waste and the waste management officer need a vehicle, and they productively use those vehicles as part of their roles.
And that'll come back through the white fleet review. But I was just saying, yeah, just probably trying to make the point that they're not additional vehicles, two additional vehicles this year. They're current fleet vehicles, but we didn't show them as an individual plant hire item previously. But that's, I think, Craig trying to explain what's the budget's made up.
But they're productively used. They're not sitting in the car park for 7.5 hours a day. No, they are productively used. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, so if we can move on then to the actual top line, the revenue, recurrent revenue, and I guess this is, Selena, where you're going to come in here. So happy for anyone that wants to open that up from the staff to walk us through that, the rating model. Selena, did you want to start that? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So if we keep going with option 2, as that seems to be the choice so far, that additional $313,000 is what was raised after we put through some scenarios. And so that was with a change to your collections. Commercial were staying the same, and there was an increase to the waste management levy. I'm not sure how you wanted to go through each of these, whether you wanted to talk through what was actually in the rating model or you wanted different options plugged in.
So can we go to page 10 at the top, the rate variance change? The top half, page 10, because that explains what the effects will be on the rates to get that extra income, the 21-22 proposal. Thanks.
Yeah, so that's the change in percentage increases for the 10 years, and that's to make sure that we're funding that out of capital expenditure that's needed without borrowings.
So, Selena, then if we look at the collections on domestic first and foremost, that's 4% proposed in this next year.
Yep. And
that would mean that they'd pay an extra $6.72 a year for your domestic wheelie bin, which would push it up from what's currently $168 to just under $175.
That's correct.
Is that correct? Yep.
Yep.
And then the 12% on the levy, as Ros was saying, that's equitably applied against all rateable properties.
That's correct.
So it's not just the local townies that pay it, the farmers would have to pay it as well. And that gives us an extra $19. That costs everyone an extra $19.50 per rateable property per year.
That's correct, yeah.
Okay. And that's how we raise that extra 300,000.
Yes.
Okay. And with that extra 300,000, if we stick with those current expenses, we've got the 2.6 million, the 6.2 million, then we're going to have a $75,000 surplus, but that's without paying a dividend. Correct?
Yes, that's correct. That's without paying the dividend, and that's also not taking into account the Bunya Mountains and what you want to do in that area.
So with the Bunya Mountains then, thank you very much over there. Daryl's given us, we've got 1,144 properties at the Bunyas, 1144. And if that was to increase by $48 to bring that into line with that levy, the waste levy, that means that their fee would go up from the current $168, Selena, and that would be increased by $48. Please stop me and correct me if I'm wrong. Just to summarise this for council, for the committee, and the $48 increase on 1144 properties provides an extra, by my calculations, an extra, just had to run that again, but 1144 by 48 is an extra $55,000 that would go into that revenue account, rates account, but you haven't currently budgeted in, have you? Is that
No,
right?
that's not currently budgeted in there, and then we just need to allow for your discount on that. Yep, so it'll be about 4,667 would be
Yeah,
about discount.
so it could be 10% if
It'll be
everyone
80,
took it up.
yeah, it'll be, we usually estimate it on 85% of people taking it up at 10%.
From 55 down to somewhere between 50, 51, based on 85% getting the 10%, yeah. So there's potentially, if council was to adopt that in its budget, there could be potentially be an extra $50,000 there that would have to come through to cover those extra costs at the Bunyas. That's an extra $48 per rateable property up there on those 1,144 rateable properties. Did we want to discuss that as a first issue to deal with and tick off? Yep. Sorry, Peter. Yeah, over to you.
I was going to say, just through you, Mr. Mayor, Selena, the Bunya Mountains one would have been modelled at increasing by the $5 or whatever increase was across the board, wouldn't it? So that would have to come off those calculations as well. So they would have, yeah, the model would have included the normal increase. Yeah,
So we could lose $5,000 through discount and another $5,500 through the $5 per across the 1,100 properties.
That's correct.
Okay, so that could bring that back to 55 to around 45. So we're doing about 45,000. Thanks, Peter. Sorry. Okay, council, over to you for discussion. We've got over 1,000 properties up there. The $48 extra. I think we need to consider that now. So, what are your thoughts?
Has there been consultation around that, Councillor Jones?
Absolutely not, Councillor Duff, because we haven't had discussions on setting fees or anything like that. So, absolutely nothing.
And look, council, at this stage, what we're doing is putting together a draft budget that we will have to take out and consult prior to being adopted. So these budget meetings, committee meetings, wrap up around the 5th of June, and then we have to the 30th of June then to give it some thought and look to what we adopt on 30 June. Having said that, it's a bit problematic because Selena's got to run new models and 10-year forecasts, so we do have to give her time if we want to make changes between the 5th of June and the 30th of June. Yeah. Okay, other councillors, questions, observations, thoughts?
Just in terms of the Bunya Mountains waste utility charge, I do own a property up there and have been up there quite a bit, and I can see the need. The bins are always full, so I can definitely see the need. In the instance, I know there are some local residents that live there permanently on the mountain, but all in all, I know the tourists, from a tourism point of view, I know there are a lot of tourists in the area using the facilities, so somebody has to pay, and I guess at the end of the day, when I'm looking at this charge, I know it's a significant increase, and I know there is no curbside wheelie bin up there, it is those facilities, but I can also see council needs to balance out those costs so they are cost neutral to council. It's not like we're aiming to earn a profit from those fees. We're just simply trying to cover the costs of taking the extra bins down off the mountain. So I think that's probably something to be really mindful of in the conversations we have with the community. Nobody wants to, none of us, not one of us seven want to see any of these rates and charges increase, but the reality is they need to be cost effective. So if that charge is going to mean that, we can service the growing needs of the Bunya Mountains with appropriate waste management, then
I'm supportive of that because it is a national park, so nobody does want to see waste dumped or illegally abandoned somewhere because there's not the facilities there. I'm with Councillor Froloff in terms of the percentage increase. It does seem like I've looked at the report closely, and it does seem like the most equitable option, particularly as a number of the residents in my division do have the wheelie bin service. So I do think actually increasing the waste management levy does mean that everybody who's attributing waste to our region is paying fairly, and you know that noticeable increase in the costs of managing waste, you know, it does just highlight for me the importance of this council turning its mind to recycling into the future and how we can, I guess, reduce those amounts of waste going into landfill into the long term. I think should always be a strategy for council. So I'm supportive of option 2. I can't see us actually achieving what we need to achieve any other way than those increases. And I guess we are trying to be fair and equitable and keep them marginal. But I will, as the Mayor has said, this is a draft document. So as we put all of this together, you know, I think it's important that we will review and reflect on that. And certainly thank you for the conversation today. I think it's been really good. And if there are any, you know, I think it's a taste of what's to come, because I think we are going to have to find those savings somewhere. We can't consistently go to our ratepayers. So that's my views anyway, based on the options presented.
So, through you, Mr. Mayor, I just want to, just declare that I know that it's probably the most equitable option and probably the one we'll end up going with, but I just want to say that a lot of the farmers don't even have a facility, like they don't use a facility, they're too far away from the closest transfer station, so it is going to hit some of those people who actually don't use any of our facilities. Just putting that out there.
Can I add something else to that? Sorry, you go, Hook.
Yeah, Councillor Duff, I disagree with that, I'm afraid. We've got a facility out there that has just doubled in the last 12 months because of rural people. So the rural people are extremely grateful for that facility, and it's the price we pay to get rid of our rubbish, because in the rural sector years ago it was dumped down in a gully, and we'd all be well aware of that. And I'm proud to say that the rural sector now, I'd speak for 99% of them, do not put it in a gully and they go to transfer stations. I get that regularly from the Chipinga one and the one at Home Creek out there in that rural sector. So it's a facility that's greatly appreciated, and it shows in the facts and the figures that those facilities have doubled in the amount of rubbish and waste being taken to them. So they are being serviced and they're being used by the primary producers. So they're there for a reason, and if they're not taking that up, that's their own fault, not ours.
I guess what I'm saying is you might have one close to you, but there's some farmers that have got them like 30 kilometres away, like they're not that close, and they've got tips on their own properties. So they're just making their own way with their waste because they're too far away from the closest transfer station.
Thanks, Councillor Duff. And Councillor...
I'm sorry, Councillor Duff, but I'm over 20 kilometres from mine, and there's people that go more than 30 to those bins, so they use them.
Yeah, that's a good debate. Thanks. Good to have two rural councillors here, can give us both perspectives. Look, the other thing I wanted to put forward is that I think even with those percentages that Selena's kindly put forward, we're struggling here with waste. We've got a way bridge in the Nango that we're going to have to replace this next build this next financial year. For the benefit of the community, the state government have told us that we have to build at our cost, your cost, a $500,000, I believe, anyway, up to $500,000 way bridge at the Nanango dump by 30 June 2022. Now, we need to find that $500,000 from somewhere that the state government require by regulation that we build. Now, that's going to have to come out of our capital, and we're just going to go to the officers now to just correct me there. Can we get some accurate information around this, officers? Weybridge next 12 months at the Nango is required, and the cost of that is going to be...
Yeah, you're correct, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, put, there's 500,000 in the budget, capital works for that weighbridge.
Okay, so 500,000 the capital works budget. Now, we know moving forward that we're going to have other capital costs associated with waste. So we need to be doing the responsible thing and building up some cash reserves. Now, I just wanted to put this to you. This won't affect the farmers. It will only affect those that have red lid wheelie bins. At the moment, the proposal is that that goes up by 12%, which sounds a big percentage, but it's $6.72 a year. Now, $6.72 a year, colleagues, is 4%, sorry. Collections go up by 4%. Now, 4%. 4% on $168 is $6.72. That is 12 cents, 13 cents a week. 13 cents a week. That means that even at that new rate, we go from $168 to $175 per year. So living in town, I have my wheelie bin. I put it on the footpath every Monday night. Tuesday morning, the truck comes and picks it up, takes it away. I walk out half an hour later and put it back. That's all I have to do. Wheel it out, wheel it back. He does the rest. For that, I pay $175 a year under this new rating model. That cost me $3.37 a week. $3.37 a week. If we were to increase that from 175, for example, to 198, we would raise another $23. That's another $23 a year. That means that as a ratepayer in town, rather than paying $3.37, I now pay $3.80 a week to have my wheelie bin picked up, taken to the dump, unloaded, it's put back down. All I've got to do is wheel it out and wheel it back. I would suggest to you that it would cost you more than $3.80 to take that out to the dump and dump it. Even though we provide free dumping services to our residents, it would still cost you, if you look at your time, your running costs on your vehicle, the hassle with loading that onto the back of a ute when it's full of rubbish. For me, I'm happy to pay $3.80 a week. Most people would buy 1 cup of coffee a week, or they might buy, who knows, what do you get for $3.80 these days? Not much. If we were to do that, I'm just putting this out there, if we were to do that, yes, that sounds like a significant percentage increase, but that extra $23 would give us an extra, by my calculations, running those here, an extra $220,000 in revenue over 12 months. So each ratepayer pays an extra 43 cents a week. That gives us an extra $223,000 in revenue. When we add that to the additional cost that we've got to pay for and we're funding from Bunyas, that gives us an extra $270,000. So about $225, sorry, from wheelie bins. This is after discount, Selena, so I've taken the 10% of the 85%, plus another 45. That gives us about $270,000, and Daryl's chuckling down there at the back. Now that $270,000 would mean that we could, rather than having a $75,000 surplus and no dividend back to Gen Ops, and now remember, General Operations we have an investment there in asset that is worth, Mr. CEO, $3.68 million, and we're getting no dividend on it. Now, even at 2.7%, that comes in at $100,000. If we were to do that, that would give us the extra $275,000 would mean that we would have capacity to pay a $100,000 dividend back to cover the mess with the asset and still put money away into restricted cash to help contribute towards next year's weighbridge. I'm just putting that out there as an option to consider for council as to whether that's something you want to do, because I am concerned that even at the 4%, that we're still falling short on getting enough cash across into CapEx to be able to fund some of these additional costs we've got going forward. And I think when you explain it in those terms, an extra 43 cents a week, I mean, to me, that's not a lot of money over the course of the year. It's $23 for the whole year to have your wheelie bin collected and disposed of. Here to just putting that out there, keen to hear what other councillors' thoughts are on that.
I actually have to say I probably agree with you there, because we need to start thinking the future. And I just would like to ask a question, Peter. You may have to take this on notice. With our dumps, what is the life expectancy of our dumps? Because I know a few of them are getting towards the end. So especially Wondai and Mergen, I'm thinking.
Yeah, they are all varied. So Nanango and Wondai have got relatively long lives left. I think Mergen will be first full, then Kingaroy. But this is why we are budgeting for down in year 8, 9 a series of the transfer stations so that we can actually create bulk transfer stations. And what we will do is transfer waste throughout the region so we can fill up all of the facilities. So it is a working program so that we would actually end up making sure we utilise all of the airspace at the facilities. So prior to looking at out of region, they are all varied sort of. But yeah, Mergen's probably the first that is the closest to filling up. It's probably only got a couple of years.
Yep, thank you.
So I've just rerun those numbers. So that would put us in a position once Selena would put this through her spreadsheet. But what you'll see when Selena does that is that if you were to give consideration to that, you could then pay a $100,000 dividend back to GenOps, which is 2.7% of capital of market replacement cost on the asset, and leave another $250,000 that could then go into CapEx, into restricted cash towards next year's weighbridge. I'm just putting that out there. To me, that's a minimal impact on the community. There'll be people in the community watching this saying, what's the mayor doing? But look, to be honest, community, to now pay $3.80 a week to have your wheelie bin collected compared to $3.37, as a resident living in town, I still think it's good value for money. But open to the views of council on that.
So, Mr. Mayor, again, just to summarise, so the two capital projects that we've got, Peter, for this next year is Maidenwell Transfer Station and the Weighbridge. They're the only capital, the fleet discussion aside, because that'll be picked up in the fleet. So the only two capital projects for waste is Maidenwell Transfer Station and the Nananko Weighbridge, correct?
Yep. And then I'm suggesting, Selena, that then the forward forecast for the 10 years, obviously no change to them. They would stay as they are, but it would just give us that little bit of a kick up in year 1 to be able to then move that forward.
So can I confirm, Mr. Mayor, that what were you doing around the waste management levy? Were you going to leave that as status quo, or were you still increasing that?
No, leaving that at 12%. If one was to leave that at status quo at 12%, which is the $19.50 a year for all rateable properties, then on top of that, I'm suggesting that 4% needs to actually change to $30 rather than 4%. So the $168 goes to $198. So what that would mean then, for a resident in town with a wheelie bin, you would pay an extra $19.50 on your waste management levy, and you would pay an extra $30 on your wheelie bin, which means you would be paying an extra $50 a year for waste services. Okay, so council needs to think about that in terms of the impact that that's going to have on our ratepayers.
And I could Mr. Mayor, I could probably reduce the collections down to maybe 2% instead of 3% in your outer years. You could probably take a lesser collection in the outer years if you decided to do that.
Thank you, Selena. And I'm also suggesting that commercial collections, as Selena's got there, don't change. They stay at 0%. I think at some point we need to start to align what we charge for commercial and what we charge for residential.
So commercial is now going to be under domestic?
Oh, yes, because it's $188, isn't it? Yeah, without the levy, correct.
I can understand. I think you've put up a really good argument and something that does need careful consideration, Mr. Mayor. Certainly, it would be great to see a return on our assets for the organisation. I'm just not sure about that increase in with all of the other increases that we're yet to discuss and decide. So is it possible to park that idea for future consideration when we're going through the pointy end of the budget, when we get I guess I want to see the bigger picture with water and waste as well as general rates before I make a decision like that.
Yeah, sure, council. Look, at the end of the day, the committee can do whatever you want, as Mr. CEO would say. The only concern I've got is that we do have to start making some recommendations here at this committee that are going to feed up to build the budget for 30 June. If at some point we don't start making recommendations up to council, then council's going to have nothing to deal with come time when Selena's going to put together a final budget. I know Mr. CEO's chopping at the bit to talk, and I'll let Mark explain that in more detail shortly. But that's my only concern. And I guess, look, I'm probably putting this forward around a philosophy. On the back of a philosophy that is around trying to mitigate general rates rises and trying to move council more towards a user pays mentality, where if you're consuming water, if you're using waste services, if you're using sewage services, and you're a state government department or you're a large commercial operator, you should be paying for those services. As a resident, I'm happy to pay $3.80 a week to have my wheelie bin collected. So for me, I think in the new age of councils, the old models of just continuing to jack up the general rate, which in my view is a land tax, that those days are fast disappearing, that we need to be moving more towards user pays models of revenue raising as a council and making sure that our business units are appropriately funded so that they can deliver the services and put money away for future capital upgrades and capital replacement. So when I talk about business units, I am talking about making sure that waste revenue, sewerage revenue and water revenue is sufficient for those business units to function sustainably, not profitably, sustainably into the future, because they need to. If we keep loading up general rates as a bigger and bigger land tax to cross-subsidise business units that are making losses, then I think we're going down I think that's a bad path to go down. I don't think that's going to move us forward in coming up. And I think we also need to look at things like our tourist parks and making sure that we can consider commercialisation of them and make sure that they're returning a dividend back to council as well as a business unit in their own right. That, to me, is the revenue model we should be looking and move forward on a more commercial footing. Not saying commercial in terms of those business units being commercialised, but saying that we need to, I'm keen to see us move through this process with the philosophy of user pays. But look, as I said, it's a committee decision. We can leave it on the table, reconsider it and come back later. But we do have to be conscious that we've got to inform these guys to be able to put a budget together by 30 June if we can. But certainly open-minded to that. Up to you guys as to how you want to move forward. Yeah.
So just with what you're proposing though, I want to confirm, so the additional revenue you would raise from collections of domestic wheelie bins, largely from urban areas which are receiving those services, as you say, I want to make sure that money is actually restricted for waste assets. It's not cross-subsidising general rates. And if we paid a dividend, it's my understanding that the dividend goes directly to general rates. It won't be restricted to support waste management into the future. Because I agree, we should be putting money aside, particularly, I know I've been rabbiting on about it since I got here, but recycling is really important to me. It's a core value of mine. I would like to see us be putting money aside for some of those to start to actually really have some conversations about those things and not impact our ratepayers, to make sure they can recycle even though they are living in a regional area. However, my concern is if we're raising money out of a council service that's putting money back into general rates when we're already, Craig's budget here, GM O'May has said, like the finance recruitment, admin recruitments, internal finances charges, this business unit's already paying $955,000 for the costs of actually council servicing it. So to put more money aside for something that may not come back to waste. So I probably just want to confirm that. Is the money that you're suggesting going to come back to the business unit for future use, restricted for future use, or is it going to go into general rates?
Happy to answer that, and it's a good question, thank you, because we need to make sure that's clear for everybody, including the community. So under this proposal, there's potential here, the modelling will have to confirm this, that 100,000 could come back to council as a dividend, and then 250,000 could then go as extra cash back into restricted cash for that business unit. If council resolved to do that at the budget, that 250 would go to that business unit. If council is I think the dividend thing is a policy question. If we're going to say we're not going to take a dividend from waste, we'll put the whole 350 back into restricted cash for future waste assets, then we need to take the same position with sewerage and water. moving forward. So if we're going to say we're going to be a non-dividend reaping council, we're going to reinvest, we're going to be a reinvestment council. So some companies will pay a dividend to their shareholders. Other companies will reinvest it all back into the development of their assets. We can either be a reinvestment council or we can take a dividend, okay, or we can do a balance of the two. But if we're going to have a policy, in my view, that says we're not going to pull a dividend from waste because we want to build up the cash balance for future assets and reinvest that money, then we've got to be consistent with that and do that the same with water and with sewerage. So then we have to accept that we will get note and plant and fleet. So then we have to accept that if we're going to take that as a policy position, we've got to be, in my view, we should be consistent. So that other business units like Tim Lowe's and the sewerage units, that they're not being disadvantaged by having to pay a dividend when waste isn't, and similarly with fleet. So I think that's a policy position we need to consider. If we don't take that dividend, absolutely, we can reinvest it back into future assets inside those business units. But that will affect the amount of money we get back into council's bottom line for operations. Okay, so we've just also got to be conscious of that. That while we have an admin recoupment, absolutely. But when you talk about the 900,000, remember those internal finance costs are the costs of borrowing for waste, where we've borrowed money for waste facilities. So they would have that anyway. It's just the admin recoupment. And I would suggest to you that the 300,000 they pay for admin recoupment is a pretty good deal. Because if you had to set up a payroll, an admin, a reception, and all the things that this office here and the other offices provide in supporting the operations of our dumps, our rates collection, it would cost you that sort of money anyway. So I don't think that the organisation is really taking profits off any of the business units at the moment, to be honest. But it's a matter for council to consider. Do we want to take dividends or do we want to reinvest? We need to have that discussion. So it's a really good question. Yeah, thanks.
And it's a really good description of the problem. I guess I'm thinking, in some instances too, I can see for us with our budget going forward, it's going to be a real challenge because some of those decisions, as you say, policy decisions that have been made in the past are going to inform what we can actually do into the future. So no, I respect your view, and I'm just not sure I can commit to that today. That's all. I think I probably need to see. I understand. I probably need to understand more about what dividend water and waste is going to pay and how that goes, and before I could make that policy decision as such, and how it would implicate on the business of council if we didn't do those things. Yeah.
Thanks, Councillor Schumacher. And keeping in mind that at the end of today, we have got a motion on the table here that we have to consider. So we have to get some sort of a motion, or that motion might be to leave it lay on the table until a future meeting if you want to have another meeting around this. But again, I'll go back to you, Mark, Mr. CEO. Yeah.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. And again, I'll second what was said before. A very good debate, actually, on a range of topics. We've got most of the components that can inform the modelling, and absolutely, this is to inform a draft budget. There's the previous GLs that we've talked about have been absolutely worst case scenario, which aren't where we're going at all. We're all it's a different area in toto. So we can certainly, and again, the cumulative effect of it is on the utility charges is always good to be able to see the average rate bill and see what the cumulative effect of all the decisions are. I'm looking at Selena, so we've got enough out of this to plug this in to see what the budget would do, correct? Yeah, so that's what I say. So we've got water and wastewater next week. Now, I'll pose this as half a question as well, because really want to knock over, as I said at the very beginning of today, I really want to, for my needs, I suppose, to continue to progress this, is knock over water and wastewater to see what that impact is of those three. That will inform loan borrowings, if there is any, for this next 12 months, which is very much out of debate, and about the timing of those programs in water and wastewater. So I would be happy enough with what we've got informed is to leave it sit until next week. We knock over water and wastewater, and then, because it's a recommendation to council, so whether we make that recommendation today or we make it next week, Mr. Mayor, And there may be a little bit of tweaking even with a couple of these things that will give everyone a week to think about it. But yeah, I really, if next week's goes as well as this today, we would be able to get wastewater waste all boxed away to inform an operational budget as well as a capital budget, as well as then it'll also knock over the loans policy in a whole. So we'll start to, it'll have that domino effect of actually moving things forward. So yeah, is that happy for a way forward?
You happy with that? Is the committee happy with that if we sort of say, well, we'll leave 5.5 on the table for a future meeting when we come back with further modelling, further information, and we can address it then as a committee process?
Well, we'd be able to knock over 5.5. I would be really, if we leave it if we just procedurally leave it lay on the table, we can easily bring it back off the table next week if we're chugging along. We'll be chugging along with a song in our heart, I suspect, and then we can have a look at the three components together. But yeah, a lot of the work, and as I said, a lot of the information out of today, from what I'm hearing, there's agreement that there might be a bit of fine-tuning around, but there's general agreement on a way forward at least, and it'll give us enough information to put a budget together for you in these, well, not put a budget together for you, but to inform the budget for you to have a look at how it looks like when all the bits come together. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. CEO. That's really appreciated. Give us a bit more time to see the whole picture. Councillor Duff, did you have a question before we put a resolution on around this?
I was just going to say that I agree with Councillor Shoemaker that in a perfect world you'd put it back into waste, but the issue that we're going to have, and the bottom line is our general operations is going to look, and I'm concerned. I'd just like to ask General Manager Jarvis about how the perception or how it's going to look with QTC when we're running a huge operating deficit and we put the money away into these different groups like waste to look after waste. But yeah, the bottom line, just want to just a general.
To go first, Councillor. The general operations is, and people get really hooked up on this. General operations running at a deficit. General operations can't generate a revenue. It gets its grants and it gets the federal assistance grants and things like that. And sometimes so when people talk about the deficit in general this is mine and how I've always looked at it. When we look at the deficit, we're looking at whole of council. So, and if a water treatment plant broke down tomorrow, as last year with the capital works with the sewage, if the sewage, if through the rain event the sewage pipelines start to collapse, council has to find the money. It doesn't matter whether there's a profit in the sewage business or not, or there's a profit in the fleet. You can't leave those essential services running. And so a lot of the time, and this council, like a lot of councils, gets a little bit hooked up in language. And with QTC look at, and I suppose for my 20 cents worth, we are still, there's a lot of chatter about deficits and things like that. We're really through the information stage at the very beginning of this journey, and I can quite confidently, and I was talking to the mayor, well, actually not this morning, we didn't get onto that one, but said in the past, I have absolutely no doubt that when we bring this back, any deficit that the whole of the organisation, when we bring back, I'll call it a real budget, but when we bring back the working budget for you, the deficit that we have from this financial year, the proposed budget going forward will be pretty much exactly the same as this, and then people can add or subtract from it from there. So the QTC stuff, we're actually tracking, we track really well with QTC, long answer short, because we're looking at the whole of the organisation, we're looking at the different components, and we're actually, it's a really good question because and the Gen Ops, yep, in a perfect world too, it'd be lovely if we had federal assistance grants and support to me, if we had that external money coming in, and local government as an industry got its fair share of the GST revenue, or the 1% of total Commonwealth money. If we moved our federal assistance grant as an industry up to 1%, it would make a massive difference to every council in the state. So that would really benefit Gen Ops. So when we're looking at these, and I think the talk before, or the discussion before was really good, we have to, but we're looking at the bits and the components and the departments as we go. But the real proof of the pudding will be when all those components come together and you talk about a whole of council and a whole of council outcome and result. So no, really great. I hope that make some semblance of sense. But it's a really good question. And yeah, GenOps doesn't have an ability often to generate a revenue except through general rates and or grants. So, and we are a very sustainable council in own source revenue.
Thanks, Mr. CEO. You happy with that, councillor?
Thank you.
Yep. Okay. Well, we've now got 5.5. So there's a proposal from the committee, consideration that we lay this on the table till next week, pending further information, some further modelling. So do we have a mover from the committee for that? Thanks, Councillor Frolov, and a seconder. Thanks, Councillor Henson. Okay, that's a procedural motion. Those in favour? Okay, carried unanimously. With that, I'll now close the meeting at 4:17 p.m. Thank you, everybody, for your first budget meeting. Could I ask that we don't leave? I'd like everyone just to stay on for a few minutes, if that's okay. Thank you.